Well, thank goodness. We'll try.
Yeah, those are the ones. I couldn't remember who it was. It wasn't anything like department, like any of that. Okay.
I'll always discuss with the police, but that way it should just be me.
Yep, got you.
One for the real boss.
Well, thanks, sir.
And one for backup to the real boss.
Bob, is there Tylenol or anything in the office?
Yeah, I was just going to get.
Hey, Brian, just supply to my food truck.
I'll take a
I'll park it at the beach. Good.
Thank you so
You are
much.
welcome. Oh, there's 2 in 1, so.
Oh, awesome.
unless
Thank you very
want
much. No,
one.
that's good. 4's good.
One in each. Are you okay?
Just a little headache. I don't want it to turn into a migraine. That'd be bad.
I understand that. Sound like some from outer space. Yeah. It might be lady.
I sure hope they open the barber shops and beauty salons soon. I need a haircut so badly.
I do too.
My son looks like he's got a dead animal on his head.
Look like my high school yearbook picture.
My hair's gonna be down to my waist soon. My son put his hair
Do we
in
have the other commissioners?
ponytail.
Both of the commissioners are already on, and so is Mr. Shredding. You have Ms. Forrest from the TPO waiting in the lobby, and you also have Mr. Tom Conley waiting in the lobby.
Okay,
They're for agenda items specifically, so they haven't been admitted.
okay, all right, so we're ready to go.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Good evening. Welcome to the regular City Commission meeting for Monday, May 4th. We'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor England,
Here.
Vice Mayor Kuska,
Here.
Commissioner George, Commissioner Rumwell.
Here.
And
Here.
Commissioner Samora.
Here.
All right, thank you. Any additions or deletions to the agenda, Max?
None from me, Mayor.
All right, from any of the commissioners?
For me.
Mayor, Mr. Law reminds me there's a resolution that he would ask you to consider as an add-on for tonight's
Okay.
agenda. He has passed out copies of it,
I see it.
and if you could add it under new business.
All right.
Mayor, this is Commissioner Dylan Rumrell. Could Max please back up from the microphone because it sounds very muffled on our end?
Is this better? Is this better?
That's better. That's a little bit better.
Better from this distance?
That's perfect.
Okay. How old are
Thank you, Max.
We will add that proposed resolution as item number 8 under new business.
Madam Mayor, there is an additional copy in the red binder in the back of the room.
Okay. All right. Any changes to the order of topics in the agenda?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So we'll start with a presentation from the North Florida Transportation Planning Organization regarding their 5-year transportation improvement program. And Ms. Wanda Forrest, are you here with us this evening? Does anyone know if she's present here in person, or is she on the phone? I apologize for the delay. We are striving to get Ms. Wanda Forrest available with us.
And I apologize, she is connected, we're just not getting audio from her currently.
Okay. Mr. Johns, do you think, should we go forward, or do you think you'll be able to connect with her? Or you have no idea, right?
The issue isn't on our end, yeah.
Okay.
Our audio is functional. You've heard from the other 2 commissioners, they're connected remotely as well. We did offer for everyone ahead of time to actually kind of log in and test equipment. We didn't get a lot of responses on that. We've been communicating back and forth with Wanda, and I think she was having an issue getting the PowerPoint out, so she was working right up till the last minute, but she did not go through an audio pretest with us.
Okay. If we move forward with public comments, is there a way that you can test with her if she can communicate?
Yep, I will leave the room and give her a call
Okay.
and see if she's having
We
an issue,
can
and maybe
try
I can
again.
assist her with that.
After public comments?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Ms. Forrest, if you can hear me, we will come back to you for your presentation. I'm going to start with public comments inside the room here. For other people who are listening on YouTube, we do have other people in our other meeting room that may be coming in for, we are accepting live public comments tonight with adhering to the social distancing requirements. So I would invite anyone from this side of the room to start with public comments. Mr. Reynolds?
Tom Reynolds, 50 Brigantine Court, 32080. This week I sent you an electronic mail. Seaside Villas, 164 property condo owners. Pierpoint South, 64 condo property owners. Seaside at Anastasia, 117 condo property owners. Island South, 36 condo property owners. Ocean Villa, you want to start the clock, Margaret? Ocean Villas, 130 units, 130 condo owners. And Ocean and Racket, 279. That's where Mr. Davis lives, at Ocean and Racket, so you'll know. That's 790 property condo owners. Now, last week, when Mr. Tredick gave the presentation, he had a figure of $336 minus the $74 that the people pay that use it. The subsidy is $262. Well, that's 790 property condo owners. Now remember, they pay property taxes, they go into the general fund. Comes to $206,980. That would be a check for each one for $262. Because there's no reason why they shouldn't get a subsidy check. Because there's a lot of reasons why they shouldn't be paying into the general fund to subsidize other people's trash. But when this comes up for the vote, this is going to define who you are. This isn't a regular vote. This isn't just a yes, no, up or down. This is to see if you're honest, or you're going to continue down the road and cheat 790 property condo owners. So every vote you've ever made, forget about them. Because this vote is going to come back on you. Because one day, what do we all do? We all stand before the Father Almighty. And he asks elected officials a question. I gave you extra power. I gave you extra. So if you cheat 790 property owners with your vote, you're going to be asked about it. And I want to tell you something. I'm one of the people you're cheating. And I've been cheated a long time. So I hope you'll do one of two things. Give everybody the subsidy, which is fair, or charge the user cost, $336. Thank you.
Anyone in the back of the room?
Ed Pritchett, 1121 Overdale Road, San Agustin, Florida. Chief, Commander, I'd like to thank you guys for the terrific job you did with beach control. Y'all must have had a slow month because you only did 651 service calls. That's ridiculous. You know, how can you do your job with that many service calls? I'll never understand it. But thank you again for your job. Appreciate your service. Be safe. Thank you, ma'am.
Anyone else at the back of the room? How about to the left here, my left? Mr. Slavin?
Thank you. Good evening. Ed Slavin, box 3084, cleanupcityofstaugustine.blogspot.com. First, I want to thank the first responders and the medical professionals, the people in the grocery store and the police, the people at CVS, everybody that has helped other people with the coronavirus. We've been through a lot. Mr. Royal, though, has been AWOL. He's not been attending meetings of the EOC. Commissioner Koska went on invitation of the county, but Mr. Royal never goes. Now, Chief Hardwick goes to every single meeting, but Mr. Royal can't bestir him to do that. He needs to be fired. Also, I fully support remanding the former St. Augustine Beach Police Garage to the care and custody of the police and the fire department.
Mr. Slavin, that's on the agenda tonight. You'll be
Okay.
given an opportunity
What I wanted to
later.
object to, though, was giving Bill Jones the status of a presenter. And
Mr. Slavin, that's on the agenda later on.
Not on the agenda, though, is the fact that Mr. Jones engaged in
Mr. Slavin,
an
that's on the
attack.
agenda later.
Is Mr. Jones' attack on Mr. Reynolds on the agenda? I don't think so.
Slavin will address that whole issue later on in the agenda. Thank you so much.
Including the arresting police cars, okay. We need to instruct the attorneys to do their job without fear or favor. They and Mr. Royal and the city staff have sat illegally, wrongfully on open records requests and have stiffed me on them. They've been very disrespectful. And when the attorneys walked in tonight, they wouldn't even talk to me and gave me a dirty look. Is that what you pay $6,000 a month for people to retaliate against protected activity? For people like Mr. Royal to conduct training of new commissioners by attacking citizens, individuals, and preparing a hostile working environment? Mr. Royal has repeatedly tolerated things like sexual harassment in the Building and Planning Department and dalliances or fraternization. We need to comply with 119. We need to comply with 286.0114. We need to comply with 119.0701. And that means the attorney's hours are ours. We get them. It's a public record. I don't want any more snooty responses from the city clerk where she says, we don't have them. Because under 119.0701, you have a duty, if it's a government contractor, to seek the records from that government contractor. You've not done that. And we have been repeatedly given misinformation and disinformation from Mr. Royal's office. Finally, we need to have the rainbow flag fly again on the city flagpole next month for Pride. And we need to have on the agenda of a future meeting discussion of the St. Augustine National Historical Park and National Seashore, and also a small civil rights museum here to celebrate and honor the people who waded in protest of Jim Crow segregation back in 1964. But Mr. Jones should not be a presenter. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to come forward for public comment?
Mayor, there's nobody across the hall.
Okay, all right. Then public comment will be closed, and we'll see if we can get Ms. Wanda Forrest on the phone. Ms. Forrest, can you hear me yet?
Yes, I can hear you now.
All right. We are ready for you.
Okay, sorry about this technology. Anyway, looks like we're good to go. I see the PowerPoint, and if you're ready, I'll get started.
Yes,
can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Wanda Forrest. I'm with the North Florida Transportation Planning Organization. We're a regional transportation planning agency serving Clay, Duval, Nassau, and St. Johns counties. And tonight I'm coming before you to talk about our transportation improvement program. It's a 5-year transportation plan, and it's for the years 2021 and 24-25. Advance the slide, please. The TIP is developed annually. It is our short-range transportation plan. Advance the slide again. We have an extensive public involvement schedule. Interesting enough, this time around, so far, it looks like we're going to have virtual meetings. So our first set of meetings will be virtual. Continue on, please. Next slide. We are going to have a public meeting scheduled Wednesday, May 27th, from 4 to 5. I'm not sure how that'll be, if it'll be virtual or be in our office. Next slide, please. And the TPO board will adopt the TIP at the June 11th meeting at 10 a.m. Thank you. So next slide, please. Now, the first project, what I did was highlight just some of the key projects within St. Johns County and looking through the TIP and trying to identify any local projects. So the first, these are some of the main projects here. This is I-95 from International Golf Parkway to the Duval County line. That's add lanes and reconstruct. We'll be adding additional lanes, and that's design build is scheduled for fiscal years 24-25. Next slide, please. Then we have 995 from State Road 207 to International Golf Parkway. That's a resurfacing, and that's scheduled for 2021. Next slide, please. We have I-95 from south of International Golf Parkway to south of SR23 interchange, and that's add lanes and reconstruct, and that construction is scheduled for 2023. Next slide, please. I have I-95 at State Road 16 interchange. That's an interchanging adding additional lanes, and that construction is in 2021. Next slide, please. And we have State Road 313 from State Road 207 to South Holmes Boulevard. New road construction. Construction is in 2022. Next slide, please. I have State Road 313 from SR 207 to State Road 16, and currently we just have right-of-way funded in 2021. Next slide, please. And then State Road 207 from I-95 to State Road 312 is a resurfacing, and that construction is in 2023. Next slide. And then we have, this is one local project I find in your area, is State Road A1A at Mary Street, and it's adding a left turn lane from A1A to Mary Street. And that construction, that's going to take place in 2022. Next slide, please. And then we have the First Coast Expressway from east of County Road 16A to east of County Road 209, and that's design build in 2022. That's the bridge, the First Coast Expressway bridge. Next slide, please. And then we have First Coast Expressway from I-95 to US 17. This is just right-of-way programmed in 2021. Next slide, please. Then First Coast Expressway from I-95 to east of County Road 16, and that's design build in 2023. Next slide, please. Oh, that's it. Any questions?
I'll start with commissioners on the phone for any questions. Commissioner George?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Rumwell?
No, thank you for the presentation and keeping us up to date.
Vice Mayor?
I have no questions.
And Commissioner Samora?
I have a couple, what is the overall budget, 5-year budget for this that you just presented?
The Transportation Improvement Program is, and in this case, it represents the DOT work program, and out of District 2, and it's identifying those projects within, in this case, I'm highlighting those projects within St. Johns County in your area. Right offhand, I don't know what the DOT budget is for District 2 for this area.
Okay. And I'll just point out, this is the second presentation I've sat through where we've got nothing in here that actually takes place in our city. So please consider us. We do have needs here also when we're prioritizing things.
Well, as I've said before, I think every time I go down there, the key is to have a voice and to speak up, even at our board and committee meetings, at our TPO meeting, and through DOT, is to keep asking for projects. I know y'all mentioned that before in the past when I've been down to present, and you just have to keep asking, and like I said, through the North Florida TPO and to FDOT. And I will take that back. As for these meetings, I'll always take comments, and I will provide those comments to, and forward those comments to DOT.
Ms. Forrest, this is Margaret England. I would ask what happened to our electric charging station.
The issue for St. Augustine Beach is there's no power source. And the location that was suggested, that was the key with not having a power source. We got to be able to, power the station. I don't know if you have any other locations that would have a power source. We are, due to several different issues, one being the COVID-19, we have asked DOT to extend the contract till December. So if you do have a location, the issue there was that there was no power source.
Max, do you recall the conversation with North Florida TPO on lack of a power source?
No, I don't, Mayor. I think the location that was picked was next to the former garage.
Right, or here by the former post office?
Yes, the former post office, because there is a power source for that building, so I would think there'd be a power source for the charging station.
Ms. Forrest, what do we need to do to proceed with discussions on an electric charging station for our city?
Well, if I can see what the locations are, I think there was an issue with the power source from running conduit, and it just wasn't feasible at the location that was suggested in the application that was submitted. But, I mean, we could take another look at that and see if you have any other locations. I mean, like I said, we are going to extend the contract out to December 31st. We've asked DOT for an extension so we can we could potentially look at opportunities in your area. I mean, the key is whether you have a power source and that is feasible for us to run the conduit to the charging station.
Okay, and so if you will, whoever is in charge of that project, if you would ask them to contact our city manager, so maybe we can start discussions again about that electric charging station. Would that be acceptable?
Yes, and I will go back and look, but we have a vendor, NovaCharge, and they looked at the location, the original one that was in the application, and they said that there was an issue of for a power source. But we can, if you have other locations, or we can revisit that.
Okay.
And I can provide a detail, and depending on some issues, I would provide a detailed a letter explaining what that is, so it's not just, oh, there's no power issues. I'll explain if there seems to be a problem.
Okay. All right, I see that other than giving you the opportunity, and thank you very much for walking us through your 5-year plan and what's going to be available and projects that are going to be done in the next 5 years in St. Johns County. And I realize we have primarily city roads and county roads and not DOT roads. One reason that state road, we do have the state road, Beach Boulevard, but thank you so much for walking us through that, and I see that there's no action required on our part at this time, but we will be taking public comment.
I have no public comment on the? Okay, Mr. Ed Slavin.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. Ed Slavin, box 3084, edslavin.com. First of all, I rise in opposition to proposed Route 313, particularly the northernmost reaches of it, which would go through the 12-mile swamp, which is a protected area that is part of the St. Johns River Water Management District land. And in discussions with current and past public officials, including Henry Dean, we definitely covet that land, that beautiful land, for being part of the National Park and Seashore. They want to put a road smack dab in the middle of it. And every single time I've raised this issue about 313, the Northeast Florida Transportation Planning Organization shows its delusions of adequacy. They have never responded. They have never provided a cost-benefit analysis. We'd like to know why they want to put a road through a pristine area like that with endangered species. They've given no coherent reason, and that militates in favor of Florida adopting a little NEPA, a little National Environmental Policy Act, that would require every government decision, every environmental decision, have a benefit cost analysis and an environmental impact statement. They don't do that. Also, thank you for raising the issue about the electric power source. Was that silly or what? They couldn't find an electric power source in the entire city of St. Augustine Beach, 2 square miles? They don't do anything for us, and I don't know why you'd want to give them money. And I don't know why you'd ever want to give them the imprimatur of the city commission approving what they say, which is basically just road building. There's no creativity here. There's no public transportation here. And let me point out that during the coronavirus lockdown, there was no public transportation whatsoever available in St. Johns County. The Sunshine Bus shut down. Now, that is federal funds and state funds laundered through the county commission, given to the Council on Aging. And they have proven again and again and again that they're maladroit. We don't have a public transportation system here. And let me ask the speaker, through the mayor, to please identify the percentage of Northeast Florida Transportation Planning Organization funds that are allocated to public transportation as opposed to more asphalt. And I thank you and yield the balance of my time.
Ms. Forrest, I don't know if you want to address any of the speaker's comments. You're not required to, but I open it up for you in case you prefer to do that.
I will just say that I will take his comments and put them in my report, and that's what I plan to do. I will say, in terms of transit, that the TPO does provide funding to St. Johns County for transit. I mean, we do take money off the top of our funding in support of transit, but that's the only comment I'll make. And regarding the charging station, we will go back and reevaluate it. And I was told by the expert, our vendor, who said there was an issue with the power source, but we will take another look at that.
Okay. Then, and next time the vendor should communicate with us a little better, because we're all kind of blank on, can't recall a communication about that. But anyway, do we have any more public comments?
Not on this item.
Okay. Ms. Forrest, thank you so much. And take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is emotional support animals. This came before us.
Are we going to skip commissioner comments?
No, we're not. Thank you. Commissioner comments. I will start with commissioners on the phone. Commissioner Rumwell.
I have no comments from last week to now. I'm good. Thank you.
Commissioner George.
I have no comments at this time. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
I would just like to thank Mr. Tredick and his team that responded so quickly and gave some prompt attention to our parkettes throughout our city. I appreciate that very much. Our citizens appreciate that. I think that the sculpture park here behind, next to the lake, needs a little bit of attention on maybe pressure washing the sculptures. But everything is looking really, really good. Thank you very much. I would also like to encourage everyone, by now you should have received your census in the mail. I would urge you to complete that and send it in. It's very, very short, but it matters so much to our little city when they're distributing funding. So if you could please complete that and get that sent in. I would also like to thank Chief Hardwick and his staff for continued diligence in guiding us through the COVID mitigation, especially as we enter phase 1. And the great job you did on reopening the beaches seamlessly, apparently. We had no complications or complaints. And please don't forget the food drive that's next week, Saturday, at the amphitheater. You can drive in. They're accepting drive-in donations. So please be generous. There's lists available. I think that Chief Hardwick distributed a link as well that will take you to a site that will give you a list of items that they're in need of. But it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. That's all that I have.
Commissioner Samora.
Yes, I just wanted to thank the chief and his staff, and also Mr. Tredick and the Public Works Department for, again, a seamless reopening for this phase 1. You guys are doing a great job. There's a lot of work ahead, but so far, you're doing great work. Thank you.
All right, in the essence of time, I am going to move forward. No comments from me at this time, other than to tack on to the thank yous, and especially make one little reminder about washable cloth masks are available from Ace Hardware. It's by the register there for donations, and we hope to make some more available through the city. All right, so we'll move on to, and we'll do staff comments later tonight. We have time. And then we'll move on to public hearings. There are no public hearings, no consent items. We do have some old business. Number 1, emotional support animals.
Good evening. February, this topic came before you. The commission saw fit to give a 120-day extension to stop code enforcement action. That 120 days ends next month. So we're here to ask for some guidance on how you want to handle this. If you recall, the variance was deemed by the former city attorney as not the appropriate mechanism. Staff suggested a conditional use. There were some concerns with that. So at this point, next month, 120 days from this date, I would have no choice but to enact code enforcement action unless the commission can direct me otherwise.
Commissioners, I have had some conversation with our city attorney, and at this point, I would ask one of our city attorneys to kind of give a recap to the rest of the commission about your findings on this topic.
Thank you, Mayor. Our analysis begins with the federal court case of Anderson versus City of Blue Ash, 798 Federal 3rd 338. That's a Sixth Circuit Court of Appeal decision. And in there, it is made very clear that municipalities must follow the Fair Housing Amendments Act. Also, it is stated that the determination of the reasonableness of the requested modification, the burden that the requested modification would impose on the defendant must be weighed against the benefits that would accrue to the plaintiff. And it is a highly specific inquiry. Additionally, this case stands for that factual disputes pervade the question of the accommodation's reasonableness and the highly fact-specific balancing of the city's interest against the plaintiff. So the question then becomes is, who is the best person suited in the city
to determine that reasonableness? Who should engage in that very factual, specific analysis and determination after reviewing the totality of the circumstances? My belief is that the enabling statute for the Code Enforcement Board, which is found in Florida Statute 162, is that proper venue. And the reason is because the Code Enforcement Board in 162.07 subsection 3 allows for the taking of testimony from the code inspector and the alleged violator. And then the Code Enforcement Board would issue findings of fact based on evidence of the record and conclusions of law, and then shall issue an order affording the proper relief consistent with powers granted therein. So it's my belief that the Code Enforcement Board is the proper venue for determining whether a reasonable accommodation should be made, and the Code Enforcement Board should be guided by those federal laws, including but not limited to the Fair Housing Amendments Act. And there, the board may engage in fact-specific analysis where they can, for example, according to the statute, take testimony, they can issue subpoenas, they can gather all of those facts required to determine if the reasonable accommodation must be given under those factual considerations. And then if the person does not, if the alleged violator does not like the determination of the Code Enforcement Board, then they have an appellate remedy with the circuit court. So it has been considered whether a variance ought to be given or a conditional use permit should be given. I don't believe that's the best course of action. I've also done a lot of research with other municipalities in our region to see if there are anything in those ordinances or land development regulations for emotional support animals or service animals, and I do not see it. So which leads me to believe that the absence of those would encourage the municipalities to use the available procedural considerations in place now, which is what is found from the Code Enforcement Board.
Thank you. Mr. Law, do you want to ask any questions about?
Nope, we'll get them on the agenda for the end of the month. We have a code enforcement case on the last Wednesday. We'll send out the letters this week and get it notified.
Let me offer commissioners a chance to ask questions. Commissioner George.
Thank you. That was a really thorough presentation, and I thank you for the work, and I don't have any questions at this time.
Commissioner Rumwell.
No, I think that was a good job by our attorney to kind of go over that for us. And at this moment, Mayor, I don't have any questions either.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
I have no questions at this time.
Commissioner Samora.
I just want to make sure I heard it correctly, so I'll break it down into layman's terms what I heard. So there will be no process for a variance or any accommodation. It will be a resident that has an emotional support animal will then be found in violation and have to go in front of the Code Enforcement Board for a hearing, and they will then follow some sort of FHA guidelines, and a determination will be made. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct. That an analysis will be had of whether a reasonable accommodation should be given in accordance with the guidelines of federal law, and if so, what those reasonable accommodations should be, and those will be entered into an order that is published by the Code Enforcement Board. And then if the Code Enforcement Board's order is not to be found in favor of the alleged violator, then the alleged violator has an appellate remedy at the circuit court.
Nice job. Thank you.
So, Mr. Law, if you're comfortable with all this, and of course you could talk to our, our city attorney some more, and then get the code enforcement officer ready for that kind of hearing, and the city attorney, I'm sure, will be available there at that hearing, and I do believe that this is the best way to handle this type of situation.
Yeah, I already briefed the code enforcement officer that prepare for a code case. For city staff, we already had one, it just never went to the board because they applied for the variance. So we saw no reason to send them to the board. At this point, we will send out certified mail, deliver one via regular mail, and then hand deliver one.
Okay.
With a citation to appear. At that point, city will brief the board that they are in violation of, or they have prohibited animals.
Right.
And we, if asked, staff will have the board defer to the city attorney.
And I believe there's not supposed to be a charge to the code violator for this hearing or
No, ma'am,
anything
no
else?
fees. Only the code board can set fees if they decide to be in fine. And I continuously remind them that code enforcement is not a mechanism to generate revenue.
Okay. Thank you so much. That's all we need for this item, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
I have
perfect.
public comment on this.
Okay.
Mr. Ed Slavin.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. Ed Slavin, cleanupcitystsaugustine.blogspot.com. First of all, I'm delighted that the new city attorney agrees with me that the Anderson versus City of Blue Ash case is dispositive. The prior city attorney even tried to tell y'all that you weren't covered by the Fair Housing Act. That dog won't hunt. He's got it right. Now, I'm thinking that what you do want to do, though, is consider an amendment to your code that'll put people on notice of how they can go through this process. Because somebody reading the code right now doesn't know, and rather than put people through the expense and harassment of a code enforcement hearing, as Commissioner Koska went through on the flutter signs before that nasty man quit last month, I'm sorry, there's a conversation in the back that's a little disturbing. If they could pay attention when people speak, I'd appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor. The Fair Housing Act was amended in 1991, and Judge Nahum Litt, who was then the Chief Judge of the Labor Department, and I had some contributions to make to the deliberations in Congress on behalf of an ALJ association. And you can get a $300,000 judgment before a HUD ALJ in a case of fair housing discrimination. And that's why it's so serious. And that's what I tried to call to the attention of the City Commission several months ago, and nobody got it, but he gets it. Thank you. So rather than expose the city to liability, wouldn't it be better to write some new code that would say, if you have a service animal, you can go through this process, rather than have somebody have the knock at the door that people fear these days, and somebody saying you're in violation? I mean, I think of that little child and the mother who were here before. How is this going to affect them? Are they going to have to hire a lawyer? So I appreciate his research, but let's have a heart with this. Let's have some compassion. Let's be a compassionate city, and let's do some more thinking about it. And I thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is a presentation by our city manager on the New Year's Eve fireworks.
I have brought his backup, the finance director. We will try to maintain the proper social distance. You have in your books the report from the previous events coordinator, Cindy Walker, in which she outlined a number of things that went very well and things that need to be improved. She particularly gave credit to the law enforcement department for their work, and the public works, to the volunteers that helped with the event and are very needed to make it correct. And she provided a number of suggestions, such as need more buses and better fireworks music, which I completely agree with. And at the final page was the tally of the revenues and expenses. Total revenue, $74,501. Total expenses, $69,529. Net proceeds, about $4,972. So we did come ahead slightly for that. You want anything to this?
I think that overall, it did turn out well. We have some little issues with some of the vendors that we are going to address this year with collecting the funds ahead of time. And of course, that all comes back to whether or not we will be able to have Beach Blast Off this year with COVID-19. We have spoken with the TDC this year. As you'll see in the report, we did receive some grant money from the TDC for both fireworks and promotional finance assistance. And that brings the crowds in, because we have to spend half of that money to bring outside of our community visitors into the function. And at this point, I believe we have confirmation that the TDC is making the $25,000 available for the fireworks. However, the conversations that we're having with them regarding additional funding are kind of up in the air. They're on a wait and see approach at this point to more or less see how the social gathering goes, whether or not we can have large gatherings. And at this point, we're kind of on hold with asking for sponsorships and vendors to come in, waiting to hear what type of event we may be able to have this coming year. We've had some discussions of maybe scaling it back, and to what extent, but we're just kind of on a watch and see. Sponsorships, it's kind of hard to go out and ask someone to provide sponsorship money when they've been closed down for a month or maybe longer. So we're going to kind of wait and see how it goes, and then plan from there.
Thank you. I can see where this is a difficult catch-22 situation this year. So I'll start with the commissioners on the phone again tonight. Commissioner George, any comments?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, catch-22 is a good way to put it. I think we just have to kind of watch and wait and see. I don't really have any questions at this time. So long as staff is kind of checking in with other cities and other organizations putting on events. We've had to pull off the beach blast off kind of at the last minute due to some changes over the past couple of years. I think if it can get done, if anyone can get it done, we can. But yeah, just maybe track what other cities are doing and keep everyone's safety in mind. Thank
Commissioner
you.
Rumwell.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I kind of have the same sentiment that Patty and Commissioner George had, with the fact that it's hard to ask businesses for money after they've been closed down for 30 or more days, and also what the social distancing would look like. Obviously it'd be great to have some sort of event, and even if it's just the fireworks for people to come down to and make sure that they can social distance and see where we are at that time. I don't know if the vendors and stuff this year would work, only because if we are at a social distancing situation, I think that takes up a lot of space in the parking lot. So, maybe a scaled down version, but I think, people look forward to the fireworks. And maybe that's something that will help, continue to build the morale as we continue to open up a little bit more every month. So asking for donations, I think that's wise not to do that at this point. And to Commissioner George's comments, I think if anybody knows how to put on a last-minute show, it's us. So that's my comments.
Vice Mayor.
I concur with all that's been said so far. I think we are in kind of a holding pattern, just waiting to see what happens. A lot of it will be out of our hands. And I agree, it's going to be a little bit tricky this year, a little bit difficult. Trying to get businesses to participate and ask for money when so many have been so drastically affected by having their business closed for 30 days or more. But I agree, if anyone can do it, we can. Last minute, we're the last minute champs. Yep, it's the holding pattern and wait and see.
Commissioner Samora.
Congratulations to everybody involved for throwing a fantastic event last year. It was obviously a success, and hopefully we can do it again. And I won't reiterate what everyone else has already said. I think we know the situation, so we'll wait and see.
I would just ask that staff put it, not maybe for May or June, but at least by July, staff add it to staff meetings to start reaching out our communications manager and thinking about if we are going to have something, what would it look like, and start thinking about what Beach Blast Off may look like so you can get it back on our agenda in August. Okay? All righty. Thank you both.
I've already asked the events coordinator to schedule a meeting either this week or next week with the team, particularly the police department and public works,
Okay.
to see where we might have to reduce things to meet what we expect will be reductions in revenues.
And we might need to reach out to different types of sponsors that may not have been hit quite as bad as the ones that we normally get a contribution from.
Now, I did ask John Regan about the July 4th fireworks, if his city was still going to hold them, and he said they were waiting and seeing about the social distancing and will the pandemic strengthen and come back around that time or not.
Okay, that's perfect, because we learned a lot when we network with the city and the county. Thank you, Max. Okay. All right. The public comments, yes.
Mr. Tom Reynolds?
Tom Reynolds, 50 Brigantine Court. Commissioners, we must watch different TV. We must read different news. Because I don't know how you can expect social distancing at the New Year's blast. If there was ever going to be a year you would cancel it, it would be this year. And you'd move on. And you'd plan for a better one the year afterwards. Because on the TVs that I'm watching and on the articles I'm reading, there's no end in sight to the coronavirus. I know here in Florida, we got a lot of misinformation coming out of the state, not tallying proper totals, deaths. But to even entertain this, I'm sitting here and I'm asking myself, what really is wrong with them? We're talking 7 months away. We're talking people are dying, record-breaking numbers, and we're talking about a beach blast because, bam, we got to bring that alcohol down here to the pier. We got to bring that alcohol right into that family fun. Not any family fun I've ever heard in my life, folks. Family fun and alcohol doesn't go together. Now, you might be aware tomorrow, the commissioners are going to cancel the summer concerts. And because they spoke to the doctor that's in charge of the health department. But did anybody here speak to her? Oh, hell no. That'd be the right thing to do. Maggie's at every meeting. Never spoke to her? Never said, hey, we might have to pull a permit in summer concerts. What do you think of that? Hey, the beach blast, doctor, what do you think of that? He's at every meeting. Never once asked. Thank you.
Mr. Ed Sleven?
Thank you. I have to agree with Mr. Reynolds, Ed Slavin, Box 3084, cleanupcityofaugustine.blogspot.com. I think if you were to take a diagram of the property where Beach Blast is held and just put little dots every place where you want people to stand, it doesn't work. And when you've got dancing and drinking, it's impossible. It's utterly impossible to impose social distancing requirements. I think you need to cancel it this year. And I think it would be a disproportionate waste of staff time. You ought to talk to Ms. Earley from Marks Gray, who's the city's insurance defense lawyer with the Florida League of Cities, and see what she thinks, and see what the Florida League of Cities thinks. But this doesn't need to happen. And in the past, Beach Blast has been an abortion. It's been a disgrace. Mr. Reynolds has only hinted at how horrible it was. First of all, there was embezzlement going on. And the chief did his due diligence and interviewed a prior city employee, and the next day she quit. Of course, Mr. Royal gave her the highest recommendation, the highest valuation. But I think Mr. Reynolds had a very good point a couple of years ago. What about First Night? What if next year, or the next time this event is held, rather than being an alcohol event, what if it were to celebrate New Year's Eve in a way without alcohol, to be more family friendly? This idea was never considered and never vetted. I mean, it's like talking to a post here when people make suggestions. They come to this podium and they make suggestions, and the staff doesn't even write it down or take it seriously. Kind of reminds me, at Georgetown in the Foreign Service School back in the 70s, in the dean's office, they had a suggestion box. And it was a solid block of wood, unadorned by a slot, unadorned by any ability to put a piece of paper in there. That's kind of how St. Augustine Beach City Hall is under Mr. Bruce Max Royal. Thank you.
Mr. Merrill Rowland.
We have this plastic here. Merrill Rowland, 6281 Old Dixie Drive. Well, you know, we pride ourselves on being a historic community. So let's talk about history and the beach blast. There is someone here in this room, and I won't say who, Bill Jones. The Civic Association, and this is a matter about the beach blast, not about what's coming up on the agenda. The Civic Association, due to a public records request that I made last year, and then again this year, states that the St. Augustine Beach Civic Association owes for 2 years. They paid a partial amount for 1 year, and they owe for an entire year of twice them being under the VIP tent, drinking champagne and eating hors d'oeuvres, the VIP tent. We all remember that. The total amount that the Civic Association owes to the people, whoever's listening to this right now on YouTube, by the way, when I watched your meeting the other night, underneath the screen it said 63 people were watching, just to let you know that you're here so you don't see that. So maybe there's about 63 people out of the 6,000 or 7,000 in this community that are concerned. And we're all taxpayers, and I don't live in the city, but what happens here affects me. And when one of us are dishonest, intentionally cheating, you know, it should be exposed. So what I want you to know is from a public records request to this city, I discovered that the St. Augustine Beach Civic Association owes $4,250 for 2 years of beach blast. Now, Max can try to counter that, but he has never given me proof. He's never showed me a check, never deposited. He says, oh, well, they paid part of that, he said in an email. They didn't pay any of it. They did pay part 1 year, I'm sorry. So $4,250, I just want you to consider about that, about beach blast. Thank you.
That's all the public comment I have on this item.
I'm sure the city will consider your comments and consult medical advice before, and lots of input from lots of agencies before a final decision is made, but thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is our property insurance and risk management. And Ms. Radis, our city clerk.
Good evening. We put out to bid for a request for proposal on March 19th, and we had 10 agencies that were looking at our request for proposal. On March 26th, they asked questions and so forth, and we sent them by April 2nd. The Amendment 1 and 2, which answered their questions, which we were supposed to do as per the RFP. We did open and had the bids open. We only had 3, and I double-checked to make sure that none of the other vendors that were interested, if they had any problems with the mail, getting the mail into us or anything before the actual bid time. And none of them they said no, that they were good, that those 3 were the real ones that were, I guess, interested. Those 3 were Florida Municipal Insurance Trust, Preferred Government Insurance Trust, and Public Risk Management of Florida. As you saw, we had an evaluation team that checked the different proposals that were sent, and it ended up where we did a spreadsheet. I did a spreadsheet showing what all was in there that we thought was pertinent. And basically, we feel that FMIT would be the best one, and they seem to have the most coverage and the most reasonable prices. And so, unless you have any questions.
I'll start with the commissioners on the phone. Commissioner Rumwell, any questions?
Thank you, Mayor. Nope, I spoke with Beverly today and discussed some of the numbers, and I have no questions at this moment. I think that it's good that we see that two of the, I guess, people who responded to the RFPs, FMIT and PRM, both of them have the weir in there for the pumps. And so I think that's a good deal. I think now that it's not a dirt mound, it's going to be a concrete, that they're now able to cover that. So I think moving forward, I'm very happy that Beverly was able to get them to do that and move forward. So that's the only comments I have at this point. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner George.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the only question I had related to the Exhibit A on, well, first of all, I just want to say I was a real advocate for not just doing business as, business as usual, that we really dig in, get the quotes from other companies, and I just want to thank staff. I think that their analysis was excellent. We did kind of a preliminary last year. It was really good, but this was excellent. It was very easy to follow as well with all the material there was to sift through. But yes, my only question pertains to the Exhibit A on the line item of the weir. It just wasn't really clear. Under FMIT, it says $150,000 pumps. PREA excluded, that's obvious, and then PRM, $500,000. We could just get some clarification. If this is saying that under FMIT, if it's $150,000 total, can you just explain that a little bit better, Beverly?
Sure. What they're doing, saying right now is all we have to cover right now is the pumps, because the actual concrete weir has not been finished. So they can't cover something that isn't finished or being constructed at this point. So what they're doing is they're going to be covering our pumps, and they've considered that $150,000 to cover those. That the others, they're saying $500,000, and that might be for the full weir once it gets completed. But I believe that this is just for the pumps at this point, because that's all that we actually have standing.
Okay, and then is there going to be any other asset that would be coverable once the construction is completed, or would it still only be the pumps at that time?
I believe so, but I know Tom Conley is on wait there, and he could answer that question probably better than I do. I believe that once the concrete and the completion is finished, then they would go ahead and cover the whole thing. Right before, they only had the dirt, so it's kind of hard to cover dirt. So now that they have the construction, I would prefer Tom to answer that, if you don't mind.
Sure. Before we go to him, though, let me just say I'm in general agreement with the $2 million coverage. I think all the recommendations were pretty spot on from the evaluating committee. So again, just thank you for that hard work, and I'll stand by to hear the answer to that other question. Thank you.
Okay. Does IT want to get, well, let me finish questions from commissioners first. Vice Mayor, any questions?
Certainly. Thank you, Beverly. You spent a lot of time on this, and it shows. I had requested the list of assets earlier today and received them, so thank you for that as well. And it's funny because I had the same question about the WEIR coverage until I got the list of assets, and then I saw in there that all we have is the pumps, and the value is $150,000. So that cleared that up. My question was, and I think that this is specific to FMIT, but on the spreadsheet that you had given me, it has the, and I don't know if you have this handy with you or not, but, okay, great. It has the reconstruction cost, the coinsurance, then the adjusted FMIT value, the current building limit, and the survey difference. Now, I did one step further, and with my Excel sheet, I totaled them up, and the total reconstruction cost is $929,000, almost $1 million. The adjusted FMIT value is $836,000. The building limit is $422,000, which leaves a survey difference of $414,000. What does that mean really for the city?
Well, again, I would like Tom to answer that because
Sure.
It's not really my forte to, you know, we're going by what they had in their books and their proposal, and that might be something more that he might not have put in.
I will save my question for him then.
Okay, sorry.
Commissioner Samora?
Yeah, so that we have it in the record, the rates that are represented here, those are annual or that's for the 2-year term?
That's annual rates. We did ask for 2-year terms, and I don't know if anyone was able to do that. They didn't really say 2 years or not. But I do know that it, depending on the price, personally, I think that we should, because of the WEIR coming up and because of the construction and so forth, that we should use the $2 million figure. I think $5 million is way overpriced. I mean, way over what we need to be insured. And, but that's totally up to you.
I agree with that recommendation. So that's an annual, and how does that compare to, where are we now?
Well, actually, it's come down from what FMIT has given us currently. They are actually, they went down before when we had that previous discussion before October 1st, and they went down now to another, you know, cheaper rate. I believe Patty knows the.
I think it's roughly 159 versus the 179 that we have on here for the quote at this time.
So for she's talking about $1 million. So, you know, we went down from what we had. So, and plus you have to remember, they also give us these grants every year. If they don't spend the money, if we don't have hurricanes or expenses and so forth, they do get percentages back every year to their clients. Last year we got $40,000 in grant money. You know, and they also give out a safety grant every quarter to anybody that applies, and they give that too. So, and it goes by percentage of how much, you know, you actually, obviously St. Augustine would be way higher of a percentage than what we are, but because of it goes by their rates. So, you know, what we cover. So with that, unless you have any other questions.
So if we follow the recommendations, we would be going from approximately 159 this year to?
The 159 includes the rebate, as Bev was explaining. So we have gotten a discount. It's about 199, and so, you know, taking into account the discount, which of course we cannot count on every year.
Right.
But we're hopeful that we'll receive that as well.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up.
Okay. I understand we have a representative of FMIT on the phone.
I believe so. Tom, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I know there were a few things and maybe you had questions about, but I just want to say first, on behalf of the League of Cities, thank you for being a long-time committed member of the FMIT. I've been here 22 years, and the city has been a member of the FMIT the whole time. I've worked with Max the whole time. So we appreciate that long-term relationship we've had. Bev was talking about the weir, and she was correct. As more hardened assets get built, we can add those to the property schedule. But for now, when we came out and did the asset survey, which is like doing an appraisal of the fixed assets that you have, all that was there at the time was the $150,000 worth of pumps. So that's what's included in your quote and on your property schedule.
Were there other
Great, thank you.
questions
That's
the
my
commissioners
question.
had?
Just
I'm
my
sorry, what-
question about
What was the other
the,
question?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
He just
Did you
asked
say
what,
there was another question? I'm sorry.
Oh, I had a question of the difference between the reconstruction cost and the value, and then the survey difference. So we're looking like we see a survey difference of $414,000. What does that mean for the city?
Ultimately, it means nothing really. I believe the city has a 90% co-insurance, which just means that as long as you're carrying 90% of the value of the true replacement cost, then you will get full replacement of the items. It's just a way to save a little bit of premium for you. Rather than 100%, it's 90%. So it's 10% break on the value of the property, but it does not mean you have to pay 10% of the loss. It's just the way it's underwritten. So that's the reason for the difference in the two numbers there.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I have a question. For
Yes,
Mr.
sir,
Connolly.
go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Connolly, thank you for answering these questions for us. Based on what I was listening to just a few minutes ago, that the $1 million coverage is now $159 and change, is the $2 million coverage, what does that number go to? If it's $192, do we drop that down a little bit as well?
Have it backwards.
that would only be if we receive money back. The FMIT gives money back for, if you don't use the money use the insurance. So in other words, it depends on what happens during the year. They usually give a grant or money back, but Tom, you could answer that if you'd like.
Well, the league has been giving this return of premium back for a number of years. It was originally started when we had the hurricanes of 2004, 2005, and then property rates essentially doubled in Florida, but then no more hurricanes came. So kind of unprecedented, we decided to give premium back for all those years where there were no hurricanes that you're paying premium for. If we didn't have to pay for a hurricane, we thought we should give the premium back. So that's where all that comes from. But of course, as Beverly said, it's determined each year by essentially whether we had hurricanes or not. If the property fund was profitable and we ended with a gain, then we'll give money back. If we have a year where we have a bunch of hurricanes, then it's not a guarantee. At each year, the board has to vote on whether they will approve a return of premium.
Commissioners on the phone, any more questions?
This is Commissioner George. Thank you, Mayor, but my question was sufficiently answered. Thank you.
Okay.
I have no further questions, Mayor.
If no further questions, then public comment?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Ed Slavin?
Thank you. Ed Slavin, box 3084, cleanupcityofstaugustine.blogspot.com. First of all, thank you all for rebidding this. 22 years with the same company. Reminds me of when Ben Rich took over as County Commission Chair back 15 years ago. St. Johns County hadn't bid insurance in 20 years. And that's a key sign of corruption. Because notwithstanding the McCarran-Ferguson Act Competition is the most fundamental policy of the United States in terms of the economy. And you can do a lot better, and you are, and you're working on it, and I appreciate that, on competitive bidding for supplies and for services. Calling your attention to that weir. Now, that's yet another example of Mr. Royal's willful, wanton negligence, because if he had included the weir on the list of assets, you would not be bare in terms of insurance coverage because of the damage that the hurricane did. That ought to come out of his salary. That ought to be a firing offense. And I appreciate every single one of y'all is asking questions about the weir, the one that Mr. Royal forgot about. You could do a lot better in terms of procurement. I think if you were to work with the city of St. Augustine, maybe to unify your purchasing operations, you could get some efficiencies, you could get some synergies, and you could probably get some better prices. And I'd like to inquire of the insurance company and also the staff through the mayor, do these policies, the proposed policies, cover, once again, they're talking in the back. Pay attention, please, Mr. Royal. Once again, I'd like to ask, do these proposed policies include coverage for employment discrimination or civil rights violations? Because you're going to need a lot of that because of the way the city is mismanaged. But I thank you for rebidding the contract and thank Ms. Raditz for her work. Thank you.
Mr. Slavin, this is property and casualty insurance, so I doubt it covers what you're asking about. Staff, any further comments on your recommendation is to go with FMIT at $2 million coverage, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And so I believe we need a motion and a vote on this. Is that correct, Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Any further comments or any further public comments? Vice Mayor, any further public comments? Okay. Any other questions from?
None here, no.
Okay, well then, I'm willing to accept a motion from any commissioner.
Okay, I will make a motion that we accept staff's recommendations to procure the insurance. Do we need to go through the levels or just state that we're good with staff recommendation?
Just the $2 million.
Okay, the staff recommendation of the $2 million coverage with FMIT.
I'll second that.
All right. Voice count vote?
Sure. Mayor England?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Costa?
Yes.
Commissioner George?
Yes.
Commissioner Rumwell?
Yes.
And Commissioner Samora?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you all, and thank you for all the businesses that did give us quotes and worked on it so hard. I think we have received a very good competitive bid. Thank you. All right, so now we are on item 4 under new business, the former police department garage at former City Hall. And before we start with this, I would like to ask the participants and public comments to please keep your comments to strictly the agenda item and the lease, and your comments on the lease, and refrain from any personal attacks, because I will ask you to move on if you start down that route, and if you persist, I will ask you to sit down. So we want to get through this meeting in a civil manner, so I please ask your indulgence and cooperation, because I know this is an emotional, maybe a contentious item, and so I just ask that you please keep it to the lease itself and what the city should be doing with that property.
Point of order, Commissioner. There has been some information handed to all you commissioners by Max Royal, I think considering this item, and we in the public are entitled to see that. So we should have a copy of that.
Do we have an extra copy to put in the back? Okay. All right, okay. So, Mr. Royal, if you would please open this up and give us a little history and what the pertinent issue is for us.
Or as Gary Snodgrass would say, Max, tee this off.
That was emailed
Bring
to
a golf club up there.
Commissioner
when
George
he said
prior
that,
to.
and swing it. Well, we go back into some ancient history here. We moved it to the new police station in 1999. I didn't realize it was 20 years that we've been in that building, or the police department's been there. And shortly after we moved there, well, not so shortly, but about a year later, the Civic Association expressed an interest in having a year-to-year lease of the former police department's garage that's west of the former city hall. And they said that they would use it for storage related to the farmer's market. Over the years, that year-to-year lease changed and became, in 2006, or 2003 rather, a regular lease for the garage for office use as well as for storage. And periodically, usually in 5-year increments, that lease has been renewed at a cost of $1 a year. The lease is currently in effect. It expires in August of 2020, this year. Mr. Bill Jones, who's president of the Civic Association, sent me an email on February 19th with a formal request to renew the lease with the Civic Association. And he provided a letter which outlined the purposes they want to use the building for, and that is in your agenda packet. It's a 3-page letter that's also available in the red book and back if the public wants to look at it. So the thing you're being asked to consider today is renewing this lease or making some other decision about the use of that building. It is, at this point, in my understanding, though the Civic Association no longer runs the farmers market, the lease was not contingent upon them running the farmers market. Because it says we give them the lease, they can lease the garage rather, to provide storage space for the operation of tenants' farmers market and for other civic activities. Well, once they lost the farmers market, they continued their use of it as an office for the Civic Association of St. Augustine Beach. And they also allow some groups such as the Bocce League to store things there. We may store things there related to Beach Blastoff. And I think we can turn it over now, unless you have questions for me on what I've presented to you thus far, to Mr. Bill Jones of the Civic Association, who can present the request in person.
Okay. Mr. Jones?
Point of order. Mayor, what about the 2 commissioners who are home right now who haven't gotten this at the 11th hour? You have rules, I'll make this brief. You have rules that nothing is to be submitted except the Friday before the meeting, I believe. This was just submitted now, and you have 2 commissioners that are home who have not been able to see this. I think this matter should be tabled. This should be tabled. Thank you.
I will ask the other commissioners that the material that has just been handed, since we have 2 commissioners on the phone that have not been able to see it, I will ask the other commissioners to just turn this over for right now. Okay? Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Bill Jones, President of the St. Augustine Beach Civic Association. For those not in the audience on TV wondering what I handed everybody, it's actually a script. It's my notes of what I'm about to say. So there aren't any deep, dark, hidden secrets in there, but I appreciate Mr. Rowland's concern for transparency here this evening. A little over 15 years ago, we did ask the City Commission to use the unused city police garage for the benefit of the community. We renovated it, cleaned it up. We commissioned a local artist to paint a beautiful beach-themed mural on the side of the on the outside of the building to enhance Pier Park a bit. And we have for a long time utilized parts of the building with other nonprofits in our community. The Bocce folks, the old Sons of Italy, and now the new Bocce League have been partners in that operation since the day we got in the garage. We actually funded the construction of the bocce courts. The Bocce League always took care of the labor. We funded the actual material cost of that operation. They're in that garage with us for over 12 years now. The Friends of the Scenic A1A use a corner of the area for storage. They print approximately 50,000 calendars and booklets that promote the scenic highway and draw people to our community. And they enter the garage monthly or so to grab more materials that they pass out and put at tourist attractions and other local businesses. Most recently, the Art Studio Group, who we also helped fund the startup of several years ago, needed additional storage for financial reasons. They were actually renting at the tune of $165 a month a storage unit to store supplies for free art classes, tables and chairs for community events, and other supplies to operate that studio. And so we created a space within that garage so that they could utilize it and save that money and use it to better serve the community. So the building itself was given to us to serve the community, and we're doing that, and we're helping other organizations serve it as well. Just for the record, no, we don't have the farmers market anymore. That was not our choice. The county chose to put it out for an RFP, and they're utilizing and taking the money that we used to take and put into the community, and I hope they're using it for some community good, but there's no direct record keeping showing that they're putting money back into the beach as we did. We do still operate the Music by the Sea concert series. We're entering season number 18 this year. We put on the city's Christmas tree pageant each year in early December, where we light the Christmas tree, have an arts and crafts fair. We do all of that at our expense. We also provide free Wi-Fi at Pier Park. We've been providing free Wi-Fi for almost a decade now. Hundreds of people get on that network every day and every week. It's seasonal, of course. We, like the restaurants and hotels, we see spikes in the activity. But those folks, when they log on, are directed to our SABCA homepage, which has links to the City of St. Augustine Beach event page and other local resources. So we are promoting and advertising the community at all times, and all doing it out of a garage that was not being utilized by the city. We'd like to continue that, but in recent days we have learned that the police department had a need. We understand that they have a need to house a couple of four-wheel vehicles that they use on the beach, along with some bicycles that their officers use on patrol along Beach Boulevard. And Bob Samuels, our treasurer, met with Commander Ashlock last week, looked at the building, talked about some things. On Saturday morning, I had a local architect come in and meet with me to talk about what kind of things we could do to make sure that that building could be used by the nonprofits, but make sure the police had their space. So for less than $500 in material cost, we can erect a studded plywood wall that would separate the garage area. There's a garage door that still goes up and down with a side door entrance that the police would be able to utilize. There's room for their two four-wheel drive vehicles, there's room for bicycles, there's room for beach rescue supplies on shelves that are already there. We would just relocate and kind of squeeze the nonprofits together on the other side of the building. We would be willing to do all of this at our expense. We have, and we would of course have Mr. Law come down and look at what we plan to do. And our lease is not up until August, but we're prepared to do this begin on this next week so that the police can utilize that space as soon as possible. And I think that in conversations with Commander Ashlock, I believe that that meets their needs, and he may have some comments on that as well. We've also learned that the county may have an interest in that building. They sent a letter to Max over a year ago talking about possible expansion of rescue services at the beach. As we all know, there was a $15 million surplus that the county had in the fall budget. Fire Rescue did not demonstrate or did not present any specific plans for use. If they had specific plans, we would do exactly what we did with the police department here and consider their needs and figure out whether there was something we could do to help, or even if we needed to vacate the building. Since they don't have a specific plan, I would suggest that if they need to keep extra stuff for beach services, that they own the mosquito control property just over half a mile from the entrance to the beach, and it's convenient. They have parking for additional folks, and that would be an alternative for them. We are hopeful as a civic association that there is some sort of long-term plan, not only for the garage, but the entire property there in front of the old City Hall. And we would like to recommend that the city create or form a think tank of local citizens and interested parties to try and come up with not only a plan to develop the property, but to find funding to develop the property, because it's not going to be an inexpensive thing to open up the second floor of the old City Hall and make it safe and habitable for either nonprofits or some sort of business. So in the immediate future, while all those other things are going on between the city and the county and that sort of thing, we would like to renew our lease for a period of 5 years at $1 per year. The terms of the lease would remain the same, and that includes a 30-day escape clause for the city should 6 months or a year from now some sort of need arise. You could put us on notice, and we would have to make arrangements to relocate, or if we failed to do what we promised that we would do, which is serve the community, you guys have a 30-day out at any time. Just as a side note, out of respect for the Commission's time and consideration of the COVID-19 situation, we asked that our board members and friends email city commissioners. We did not want to parade a bunch of people in here tonight and prolong this meeting. I did invite board member Ed Pritchett to come as well and be here. And at this time, if the commissioners have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
We have received all those emailed, that's duly noted. All right. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Do commissioners have here, Vice Mayor, you have any questions right now for Mr. Jones?
Not at this time, thank you.
Commissioner Samora?
None for Mr. Jones, thank you.
Commissioner George?
Thank you, not at this time.
And Commissioner Rumwell?
No, not at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to turn to the Chief or Commander Ashlock, if you would like to
yes, Mayor, I have
give us some comments.
a short little PowerPoint presentation. I want to look like a, let's see, I know one of these. I have to phone a friend. Back to the, oh, here we go. It's not already on the computer. I'm sorry, Max.
Put the thing down there.
Careful out, didn't you?
Oh, man, Anthony. Right, so we identified a problem, the need to store one of our all-terrain vehicles or one of our utility terrain vehicles in a location that's protected from the elements. We had a vehicle that was temporarily stored at the Embassy Suites in their garage, but it was still exposed to the elements through wind. It was covered overhead. The vehicle was getting towards its end of life anyway. However, I believe if it were stored inside, it probably could have lasted another year or so. That vehicle has since been replaced with a vehicle that we purchased with some grant funding. So in the meantime, we just like to prolong that vehicle's life as much as possible. So our issue was we wanted an enclosed space to find it. The big point to see here is that in an emergency, having to return to the police department to then get another vehicle, officers leaving their vehicle at the police department, then going down to the beach in their off-road vehicle, there's a time delay that as we all know, time is what saves lives. So having that vehicle down by the beach and also having that police officer's car at the beach as well serves two purposes. They can get on the beach quicker when they come back. If they need to get some of their equipment from their car to do whatever they need on scene, they can do that. It's all right there. So the solution that we came up with would be to reutilize the city property to adequately store our high dollar item. It's over $10,000, the new one that we did receive. And the existing city-owned garage currently at the pier was one of the remedies that we could find and fix this problem. And I appreciate Mr. Jones. He met with me today as well so I could take some pictures. Also spoke with Mr. Samuels. And again, the Civic Association has been extremely helpful in trying to work out a solution for this. So I did 2 courses of action. So this is course of action number 1. And I spoke about this with Mr. Jones today and also Mr. Samuels the other day. So if you look at that shaded area, this is looking from inside the garage east out the only access door. So that shaded area is where there would be a wall built at the leasee's expense, and that would kind of separate the structures from our stuff and also us from their items. And if you look at the small shaded area on the corner, that's where they would then put a door so they could have their own entryway, because right now the only entry into the building is that easterly door or the rolling garage door. The door would go where they had previously blocked off another garage door. So there's just a wall there. And then I just have here, all the costs, as Mr. Jones said, would be provided by them setting it up. And then one of the other considerations for both courses of actions again would be utilities, building maintenance, and also so who's gonna pay for what. I don't know if we did take it over all the way or partially, if there would be any liability issues with the city or utilities that we would have to share or whatnot. Anybody have any questions on this course of action?
No.
So, and this is another picture. I know Commissioner Samore asked the dimensions of our vehicle, so that's actually the new vehicle that we have right now that's getting undercoated right now. It's not marked yet, and those are the dimensions of it. And if you look again, this is looking from the entry doorway. This is looking west towards the garage. And again, you can see the shaded area right there is where they would put that wall that would go in from floor to ceiling and from wall to wall. And also that there's a small window which they would also cover. So our UTV, which this is, it would fit right back in that corner. Of course, a lot of those items in there would be moved over to their side, and that would allow us to store what we would like to store in there. And also, which is good for the city, looking straight back where those shelves are, to the right of that is one of the city's sprinkler systems, correct, Bill? And that's also so Public Works will still have access to that as well. So course of action number 2, and this just goes to the issue with the county fire rescue. I talked with Chief Pravat and Chief Hellstrom, who is over marine rescue for St. Johns County. So they have a need. Of course, this is their garage. I took this picture today, and they have one of the UTVs, and behind that is a jet ski, and then all their marine rescue stuff. And the smaller picture, if you can't see it, is a jet ski that's being stored outside. So they also, I guess, the letter that was written to Max, I followed up with the county land acquisitions lady, and then she said yes, they would like to be interested. Then I followed up with Marine Rescue. So they said, yeah, of course they would like to store some stuff there because they are in the same predicament we are. They can't really put any items in mosquito control property or at one of their other county property because they have to get to the beach just as well. And we learned that back in October when some of our officers actually had to do a water rescue, and some of our officers beat marine rescue, and partially because of the complex situation they have. They have to get the jet ski behind the UTV. They have to move a bunch of equipment. Normally they'll take it out and they'll stage it. So Marine Rescue is a great partner with the city and the police department, just as the Civic Association is. They also let us use our facilities. We share equipment sometimes, and they also provide training for us, especially our beach patrol officers that go through water rescue or lifeguard training for the most part. I even think they, just talking to Chief Hellstrom, I believe even that may take some more finagling with the Civic Association, that we could get their UTV and our UTV in that space that I previously identified in course of action number 1, while maintaining the Civic Association's, some of their items in there as well. I don't know what that would look like, but it's definitely possible. And then also I spoke with Bill this afternoon and Ken, and he provided that they would, of course, who doesn't want some storage space? So they said they could put some BBO items in there, and also some of the holiday lighting and some other items that they use at the pier. So that's all I have for that. So basically those are kind of the 2 courses of action that I came up with, and possibly a third would be to follow back up and see if we can, but it would take a lot more construction, I think, to get Marine Rescue and us in there together. But they're, like I said, they're a great community partner, and they also, per Chief Hellstrom, said that they would help out financially with any, if they did have stuff in there with whatever that may look like. Nothing structural, but some light stuff here or there, they would be more than happy to help out with.
So Commander, just for clarity, can you summarize, are you asking that you share space with the Civic Association? Are you asking that the police department take over the lease? Just to be real clear on what you're asking.
Yes, ma'am. So again, for course of action number 2, this is the course of action that I would recommend, which would have us taking control of the entire building for storage. However, I do believe that maybe if we did that, then we could come and revisit what space is left. Because if you look at this picture, so this is, the iPhone has a big, like a fisheye lens on it now. So this is kind of not a very good representation. If you look at it, it looks a lot bigger than it is. But their office probably takes up about 2/3 of the building. So it's think of a big rectangle with a smaller rectangle in it, which takes about 2/3. So while we could probably put something in there, the space isn't just conducive to putting multiple vehicles in there. So when I was speaking with Mr. Jones, if we were able to get us and Marine Rescue in there, it would probably take some considerable, it would probably have to half the garage in half literally, with a wall down the middle, and then they would lose some of their office space. But if that were a possibility, I believe that would provide us plenty of space to keep what we want in there.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Any other commissioners have, or Chief, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just one thing to clarify, we do not want AC, we do not want office space, we don't need a substation. We're looking for an area to store at least 2 of these UTVs in the summertime, because one is usually on beach patrol with our full-time beach patrol officer. So we're looking to store 2 of these UTVs. I talked to Fire and Rescue. Their UTVs are a little bigger because they actually transport patients on their UTVs. So it's the same design as our UTV, but much longer than ours because it actually has a stretcher in the back. I know we've all seen it outside of Station 7 in the past. So just so you know, myself and Commander Ashlock, we've reached out to Beach Services, we've reached out to St. Johns County Fire and Rescue Station 7, we've reached out to St. Johns County Marine Rescue to see if they could partner with us over the last 2 or 3 years, and everybody's out of space, as you saw. So they're physically storing, their jet skis outside. And again, ours is, we keep saying it's inside, but it's not. It was under the parking garage in the Embassy Suites, where it was readily accessible to us in an area they weren't using. And it was in the elements. So it's been there for the last 2 or 3 years. And the only time we've had to move it back is, of course, during the hurricane. So we do not want office space. We do not want AC. The only thing we need is, a garage where we can store these things side by side, and not have to, again, Fire and Rescue is asking for space too as well, because they're stacked on each other inside that building, just to clarify. And I appreciate all the hard work that Commander Ashlock's done on this. Thank you.
To clarify, do you have only 1 ATV?
No, ma'am. We have 2 of the size of the similar to Fire and Rescue, which you saw in the picture, and then we have a smaller one that's actually just a regular ATV, like a all-terrain vehicle.
And where are those stored?
We only have 2 left now that are stored here at the police department, and then we had the 3rd and 4th one was stored at Embassy Suites, but they've been declared unserviceable by a welding inspector, and then Public Works has actually taken those over there to their department. So currently the ATV and UTVs are stored at our police department because it was unserviceable, the one that was at Embassy Suites.
Well, wouldn't it be more convenient to have them both stored closer to the beach?
Yes and no. It depends. We need one at least down there, yes, because usually the other one is either on the beach. So what we've had happen to us here in the past, and why it's at Embassy Suites, is we've had our patrol officers, let's say it's after hours, and we get a call for service after hours, meaning beach patrol is gone for the night. We get a call. Our vehicles are not vehicles that can go on the beach with all-wheel drive. So they immediately jump on a Polaris that was kept down there, an UTV or an ATV, whatever you want to call it, an all-terrain vehicle, and they would respond to a call for service. So we have to have a machine that's readily accessible at the beach, at least one.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Samora, any questions for the police department?
No, not at this time.
Commissioner George?
Not at this time, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Rumwell?
At this time, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, all right.
Mayor, before he takes it down, can I make one comment about plan number 2? Because
We'll discuss that, Mr. Jones. We'll discuss it. All right, I think we're ready to take public comment.
All righty. Mr. Tom Reynolds?
Tom Reynolds, 50 Brigantine Court. I'm saddened not to hear it's going to be a substation, because I know Chris Stickland, the guy that's running for sheriff against Robert Hardwick, he thinks it would be a great place for a substation, not just a storage yard. I ask tonight that the commissioners not renew the lease for the following reasons. Mr. Jones stated that the farmers market operator doesn't give any records to put back into the community. Mr. Jones never gave any records to the city or the county. 2, I ask that you don't renew the lease because of the harm that he caused to the deaf and blind children when he canceled that concert. 3.
Mr. Reynolds, move on with regard to
I'm asking this commission not to renew the lease based on these reasons. Are you telling me that I cannot tell the commission of the reasons why I want him not to renew?
Let's not talk about individuals.
I'm going to ask that the commission not renew the lease because of the convicted felon that was allowed to operate a food trailer without a license at the Civic Center.
Mr. Reynolds, move on, please, from personal attacks.
A personal attack?
Please.
Is talking about the convicted felon that was allowed to operate? That's a personal attack? Number 3.
Move on, Mr.
Handicap parking. We know that the Civic Association blocked all the handicap parking. Now, we know that was a major problem. 4, I ask that you don't renew the lease because they cheated the county out of the electric money. 5, I ask that you not renew the lease because they put a 220 power and almost cooked the child, almost killed the child. I also ask that you don't renew it because Bob Samuels was stealing the tips of all the other people that ran it. It has been a slush fund for years. It's time to take fiscal responsibility and put Jones to the curb where he belongs. Deaf and blind people, huh, Margaret? You okay with them harming that? Shame on you.
Mr. Merrill Rowland?
Just give me a moment here. I like this. Does this protect you from me or me from you? Merrill Rowland, 6281 Old Dixie Drive. You know, I like to watch Columbo, and Columbo always says it's not always what someone tells you, it's what they don't tell you. It's not what they do, it's what they don't do. What Mr. Jones has not told you is that one of the big sponsors of the Civic Association is a mini storage place. So he can move anytime. There's no hardship here. You have not created any hardship for the Civic Association. If you look on their page, Facebook page, and on their page, sabca.org, they have a mini storage place right here at the beach as one of their big sponsors. So they can go, so don't worry about them. Don't worry about them at all. They talk about renovating the garage in 2005 at their expense and volunteers. I made a public records request to this city. There was never any permit. They operated illegal. That voids their contract with you that they have now. Is that what you want to have continue? They're saying, well, we'll have Mr. Law now take a look at it. But previously, there is no permit and there was never any inspections. We don't know what they did in there. They've also been subletting. Whether they're charging for it or not, it's against your contract with them to sublet. It just shows that they don't care about you and they're just going to go willy-nilly about anything. Farmers market, I was there at the county meeting at the RFP. I've never been one before. Very professionally handled. Undine Pulowski's father, Michelle Pulowski, came in with more points than the Civic Association did. They came in third. The Civic Association came in dead last, fourth for the RFP. And so the nice people that have the farmers market have never been offered by the Civic Association 1 square foot. They've had that farmers market now for 3 years, not the Civic Association. They haven't been offered 1 square foot of using that. So the Civic Association had no use for it now that the farmers market is gone. And as far as Wi-Fi is concerned, they don't provide that Wi-Fi. He's lying to you about that. My friend Jay that owns Popalock paid for all that equipment. And my friend Jay that owns Popalock is the provider of that Wi-Fi. If you'll just give me a few more seconds because I had got discombobulated there. So it's Popalock that provides the Wi-Fi. He's lying to you. And the last thing I want to tell you, it is bad for security. I've been a security expert for 30 years. It is bad, very bad, for you to have the police department there and for these criminals to cohabitate with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Rolling.
Mr. Ed Slavin?
I agree. Ed Slavin, box 3084, cleanupcitystontaugustine.blogspot.com. Seems like this is a little Tammany Hall here, the St. Augustine Beach Civic Association. It's a 501c4 PAC, and I don't think you want to contaminate the police and fire garage with an interest like that. You ought to ask Ms. Earley and ask competent insurance defense counsel, how does the lack of security of allowing them to be in the same building affect the insurance rates? It's like Chicago writ small around here. The Civic Association supported candidate after candidate after candidate, and that's how they got this unholy $1 a year lease. Mr. Reynolds raised some very good points at County Commission on Tuesday, and the Civic Association retaliated. I would ask that you incorporate by reference or spread upon the minutes what I have told you all in the emails. This is a very clear-cut case. The coronavirus requires that we have police and rescue people on the beach to ensure social distancing. We can't do that practically if they have a rusty old ATV and if it's located nowhere near the beach. Also, I'm really troubled by the idea of us getting something from Embassy Suites, whether free or paid. I've done a records request today. Is there a lease with Embassy Suites, or is this just another sweetheart deal? But this is a sweetheart contract. It violates Section 178 of the Restatement of Contracts, second, contract violations of public policy. And there's another space that the Civic Association and the A1A Friends have access to, yet another government piece of property at 2175 Mizell Road, where they have free office space, and so far as I could tell, the county still hasn't done a lease, and they certainly haven't made them pay. So let the police and the fire department take over this property, and I thank you for your time.
I have no other public comment on this item.
All right. Therefore, Commissioners, it looks like we have a request by the Civic Association to renew the lease, and we can consider if we want to do that with sharing space. We can put any conditions we want to in that lease, or we can flip over and take back the property and work, and the city use it, and then the city can then have the maintenance and any sharing the city wants to do with nonprofits, if that's what the city wants to do. So I am going to open it up for your thoughts on some of the alternatives put forth in the packet, and and based on the presentations, to discuss what you think might be best for the city and the residents of the city, considering all parties here. So I will start with the Vice Mayor.
You want to start with the phone people?
I'm giving them a little bit of a break to think a little bit.
First, well, so there's a couple of concerns that are before us. Number one, space that is obviously a need for the city. I believe that at the time that the lease was made with the Civic Association for the use of that building, as Mr. Jones pointed out, we had no defined existing need or use by the city for that piece of property. However, one of the most important things that we have to keep in mind is the preservation of our city resources. And our physical assets are part of those valuable resources. It includes the ATV vehicles. It includes the time that it takes to go from the beach to the police department and back to the beach could be the amount of time that makes a difference to someone's life. I think that to share the space with Marine Patrol and Beach Services is an ideal spot. I also think that we have to keep in mind that for several years, we have been saying no to our Public Works Department to build them a building to house their vehicles. So if there's a way that they can put some of their things that are in storage in their garage into that facility so that they can put a vehicle or two or three into the Public Works garage, that would be another way that we can preserve our physical assets. So things have changed. The city has needs now. The city could utilize that building. And I think that it would be in our best interest for the police department to take over the old police garage. A couple of other things that I would like you to keep in mind is that it is city policy to rent our city properties at fair market value. I brought this point up when we were talking about the dance company lease, so I'm not trying to single anybody out. So we have in consideration of the things that the Civic Association has done, given a very lucrative lease. I can tell you that I have a storage unit. It's a 10 by 20 foot storage unit, and I pay $199 a month. I know that the going rate throughout the county is between $8 and $12 per square foot. So if we calculate that over a 15-year period of time, that's a considerable amount of money that we have saved the Civic Association. But it's time. It's time to put our needs first and preserve our assets of our city. And I think that this is a good step in doing that.
Commissioner Samora?
Yeah, it seems our little garage down there at the pier is a very, very valuable, sought-after piece of property at this point in time. I agree with Vice Mayor Koska. Times have changed. I'll just keep this real simple. I think we have to take care of the needs of the city first. Our municipal partners with fire and rescue in the county second, and then third, if something can be worked out, then with a partner like the Civic Association, who does give back to the community. So I've got no problem with any of that, but I would prioritize the needs in that order. I'd defer to the chief and his team. If they need the whole garage, as far as I'm concerned, it's theirs to have and utilize. If they want to share it with the county and take the whole thing, great. If they can get everything they need in 2/3 of that building or half of that building and allow the Civic Association to stay, I would support that third. That's my position on it.
Commissioner George.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to commend the Civic Association for all their community work as well as their teamwork here on this issue. I think it's great cooperation between the city and any nonprofit. That's great, and I love the the problem-solving approach that was utilized. However, I do, need to echo all of the statements made so far by the other commissioners. Public safety is our #1 priority, especially now. I think that's everybody's priority, as well as preservation of city assets. And that public safety priority extends over to the needs of fire rescue. It's true, times have changed. And to the extent we're able to, or the police department, if they take it over, to the extent they're able to assist any nonprofits, I think there should be opportunity for others to speak up and see if they need the space rather than it being under the umbrella of one organization. But we have a legal issue here that has not yet been addressed. Our land development regulations indicate that institutional use includes government offices, farmers markets, garage sales, pharmacies, schools, libraries, art museums, recreational facilities, hospitals, and public utility facilities. Nowhere in that definition includes the allowed, as an allowed use, storage facilities or office spaces. So, I'd like to help any nonprofit, but we would need to figure that out anyway, because right now, what's being requested by the Civic Association, because they no longer have the farmers market, I don't see legally how we could grant them a new lease. All that's a bit moot given the needs of our law enforcement and fire rescue, but it sounds like there's opportunity for cooperation. So I raise this legal question so that if the police department determines that there will be available space, that they work that issue out before it comes back up. So I'm sure there is a way to work that out, but that's an open question. So again, thank you for your work, Civic Association, over the years. For the good works that you have done, because there have been many, but we got to put public safety first. Thank you.
Commissioner Rumwell.
Thank you, Mayor. I echo similarly to everybody else, especially Commissioner Samora, in the sense of, public safety, Commissioner George and Vice Mayor Casca, we've got to look at public safety first. And I think that the Civic Association understands that. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing from their perspective either. I think it's great that the county can utilize some of that as well. Again, I'm about building bridges, and the more we can do to show the county that we want to participate and be on the same page with them, I think that helps us all in the long run. And if there's space left over, I think that's a discussion to have. I think if it's utilized for public safety for the city of St. Augustine Beach, then that's the first and most important part. And then I think that we can go down the road and see if the police department doesn't need it all, or if the county doesn't need any of that space, or if we don't need it for our public works department per Vice Mayor Casca. I think that was another great example of taking care of our city needs without neglecting them and having costs that are coming to us. But I think right now the police need it. I think Ocean Rescue needs it. And then I think we can cross that bridge after that, depending on how much space that they need. Thank you.
My thoughts are city needs are first. However, the Civic Association has worked and has been a benefit to the city for all these years. And so I think if we are going to take back the garage, we need to work out fair, in fairness to the Civic Association, we need to work out some terms to let them survive month to month for a period of time until we can work out something between the city and the Civic Association if we're going to share space and what that looks like. And it can't just be the lease is not renewed all of a sudden in August. I believe they need.
I adamantly disagree. I don't think that we are in a position to put any stipulations on what the police department should use that space for if we're going to turn it over. And it's not all of a sudden that it's going to expire. It doesn't expire until August. For 15 years, they have been the benefactor of a free lease. It's not, we have to put the needs of the city first. It can't be any other way. And we cannot bind the use further if there's a need by the police department, the county fire and rescue, marine rescue, beach services, public works. Let's leave it up to them to negotiate something with the Civic Association. We need to just allow the lease to expire, turn the garage over to the police department, and let them deal with the whole thing. They sound like they're willing to work with them, but leave it up to them.
All right. Commissioner Samora?
Again, first priority is police department, and I think they need, it sounds like a lot of this stuff is fresh as far as how much space do you need and how can you accommodate fire rescue, your needs, and then third, Civic Association. So we're in May. We've got May, June, July, at least 3 months to work that out. I think that's plenty. I think that's enough time.
You think it's enough time?
There's currently a severability on it's 30 days anyway. So I mean, we could make a decision today to terminate it, and they would have 30 days. So we've got 90 days to work something out. I think we allow Chief and his group to go ahead, start working with the Civic Association and Fire Rescue on a plan, and I don't think we restrict them. If they need more time, we can accommodate it at that point.
Commissioner George, any further thoughts?
Yes, I agree with the approach of both the Vice Mayor and Commissioner Samora. I think we do have time to allow all of the interested parties to, flesh out some more details. Without a doubt, we need to accommodate the fire rescue. Seemed like the correspondence that came in was just dated today, so they're going to need some time to figure out what they need. But we've got to put public safety first. This is not space. The space doesn't provide an essential function. It's a convenience. I want to support the Music by the Sea, but again, it's a convenience. It's not essential. Whereas marine services, fire rescue services, law enforcement, that is essential. So we've got to just put that forward. I would say don't bind any hands at this point. Allow the lease to terminate. Let the police department take it over. And in the meantime, those interested parties can keep talking. And if they have something else to bring forward to us, I'll be happy to hear it and give it a blessing as long as we're putting public safety first. Thank you.
Commissioner Rumwell.
I think Commissioner Samora and Commissioner George pretty much summed up, what I think is a good compromise for everybody. And, the question I have is that if the city, if the police and the fire rescue take over that lease, do they have sole discretion then if they want to sublease it to another not-for-profit, whether it be the Civic Association, whether it be any other one here in St. Johns County, do they have that right to do that, or does that have to come back in front of us?
That might be a legal question, but I don't think that the police department needs a lease because they're part of the city. Could we have
I agree
a
with
way
that.
in by
And
legal?
It's an asset of the city, and therefore it's determined by the city commission on what the use would be for. Although in the past traditionally it's been used for police and that particular purpose. If the commission decided it should be used for a different purpose, it could. But there would be no need for the police department to sublease. Yeah, that would be a decision.
Okay, I just want to
completely within your purview.
If I may answer, Mayor, too, as well. I don't think that the police department needs to be in the leasing business. That's not who we should be. I don't want our police department picking who subleases or joins our building. I just know it's easy for us to pick that St. Johns County Fire and Rescue is an easy partner. I think you let the police department lay out our footprint, the St. Johns County Fire Rescue lay out their footprint, which could be the rest of the building. I don't know. They haven't had that chance for us to even give them how much space is available. But for us to be involved in subleasing, we don't want that. I want one garage that we can keep our 2 ATVs in at least, which is, there's only 2 garage doors there. We don't have a problem with sharing with St. Johns County Fire and Rescue, but if you look at what they showed us on the screen, I'm not sure we can fit what they have in there. So I think we need to give them the opportunity, them meeting St. Johns County Fire and Rescue. And if it ends up being thirds of the building, I think that last third comes back to the commission and you decide who goes in that building, not Commander Ashlock and I and Chief Ravat. That's just what we keep saying it's the police department's building. It's not. It's our building. It's a taxpayer's building. It just happens to be the old police department garage.
Right.
I just simply want a garage that we can store our UTVs in, and I think the St. Johns County Fire and Rescue is in the same boat. UTVs and their equipment and get stuff out of the weather so it lasts, the stuff that our taxpayers pay for. But if there's, and I'm just saying, if there's 10 square feet left over, then I think it needs to come back to the commission, and whether it be the Civic Association or another association here in St. Johns County, I just don't want to be in the leasing business.
Well, I can tell you when I posed the question to our city manager about the city just taking back over the garage, because it is a city asset, no one wants to be in the position of deciding which nonprofit uses the garage. So that's you know, that's part of the problem is. But the commissioners have spoken about and expressed your desire that the city take back the garage. And so I will be open to anyone proposing a motion on whether or not, the question is whether or not to renew the lease with the St. Augustine Beach Civic Association, which expires in August.
I think I can do this. I move to allow the lease between the Civic Association and the City of St. Augustine Beach to expire at the end of the term and turn the use and control over of the building to the police department to prioritize shared use with County Fire and Rescue and Marine Rescue, Public Works, and Beach Services.
This is Commissioner George. I would second the motion if it was just a motion to allow the lease to expire.
Okay.
Because I don't think we want to put all those restrictions on it at this point. The city will then have control of it. We don't have to, by motion, turn it over to the police department. I think that's just something by consensus. And similarly with the, maybe the city attorney can correct us here on this, but I don't believe we need to reference the county at this point in time. Can we get some clarification before we proceed on the motion, please?
I agree with you on that, there would not be an immediate need to determine the future use.
Okay, duly noted. Then I will move to allow this lease to expire between the Civic Association and the City of St. Augustine Beach.
I'll second that.
Roll call vote, please.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor England?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Koska?
Yes.
Commissioner George?
Yes.
Commissioner Rumwell?
Yes.
Commissioner Samora?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all. I know this was a hard one. All right. Next item on the agenda is a budget matter. Mr. Royal?
The finance director is taking that.
Commissioners, I just wanted to give a quick update on where we stand. We've talked briefly amongst us with some numbers that were sent out regarding the revenue and the situation of the city as it stands right now. Through March, which was halfway through the year, we are trending our expenditures at 45.9%. So we would normally be right on target, and it appears that we are. However, you throw the COVID-19 issue into the mix, and we're kind of up in the air. And unfortunately, as of right now, I don't have an update. I cannot give you firm numbers because the majority of our revenue that comes from outside of the city runs 2 months behind. So the shutdown in April, we will not actually see the effects of that until we receive our revenue checks from the state and from Florida Power and Light until June. So it's very hard at this point to judge how this is going to affect us. This is something that the FGFOA, the Florida Governors, or the Finance Officers Association, we have been sending emails throughout the state of Florida. And we're all kind of in the same position. We are watching, we're hopeful, but at the same point, we just don't know. We keep an eye on the Office of Economic and Demographic Research, which is where our revenue numbers get fed to us during budget season. They come out from the state to say your half-cent sales tax, this is what you can plan on in your budget. Communication services taxes, the local option gas tax, the state shared revenue proceeds. All of those things get fed to us from the state level. And at this point, again, 2 months behind, we just don't know where that's going to fall. But it is something that we are actively trying to gauge for. So when we shut down throughout the city, throughout the country in April, we put a spending freeze in place for the city of St. Augustine Beach. So if it's not necessary, we don't spend it. They are running things past me when it comes to purchasing, and what we need is what we're actually buying at this point. We've made some small changes. We typically would have fuel cards for our purchases, and rather than go to an outside station and use the fuel cards, we've moved it all back to our bulk pumps at Public Works. So we're able to get a much better price in fuel, buying it in bulk and putting it in our tanks, and then just filling up our city vehicles that way versus going out to the station that's close by and filling up. When we initially looked at it, it could be anywhere from 35 to 45 cents a gallon difference in that. So it's the little things at this point that we are focusing on. We have started the fiscal FY21 budget. Again, it's kind of hard to gauge where we're at with all of that. The revenue numbers, unfortunately, they are expecting those to be delayed because they typically would come out in the month of July, where we could throw those in there for our preliminary budget review, and they're just expecting a delay with that from the state level. I know that there were some discussions in the last meeting about, reaching out. We as a city, we need to, join together with, our other fellow cities in saying to the state, we need a share of some of that relief money that they have out there to get us by, to make sure that our budgets are whole for this year and going forward. It's going to be a very tight year as far as budgeting expenses go. We've started putting those in there, but we are looking at things to scale back on where we need to, maybe bring them in-house and do them. So I apologize, I don't have any better information or better numbers. Other than, as I get them, I will feed them out to you. And I expect you'll probably be hearing from me monthly as we go forward with the the revenue numbers and where we're going to be.
Thank you very much. And I know I've asked you some questions, and perhaps you have already sent some emails out and shared some of the accounts with the other commissioners where we might be coming up short. And since, what is it, 12% of our revenue comes from the state?
So 11.79% comes from state-generated revenues. 10.03% comes from Florida Power and Life in the form of electric tax and franchise fees. And then the bulk, of course, of our revenues come in from our ad valorem taxes. So taking all of that into consideration, it's almost 59% of our revenue is outside of the city. We have some things that we have put in place which are positive. The solid waste franchise fees, which went into effect in November of last year. We are starting to receive those revenues in. As you saw in the budget adjustment that we did, the budget resolution last month, we did recognize some of that revenue. So that does help to offset some of the shortfalls. We just have to find other ways to try and, find other revenues. Unfortunately, we do get some revenue from renting our meeting rooms, and with the no, large groups meeting, we have no one in the meeting rooms, and I don't anticipate us opening those back up, immediately. It's going to be several months at best, so that little bit of revenue that we may have had coming in there as well, that also impacts us.
As we develop our capabilities for teleconferencing, well, I guess the other people who are using meeting rooms would have their own teleconferencing capabilities, so there's no way of using teleconferencing to rent out, right?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so. I would say that if they're going to do a Zoom meeting, they could do it
on their own.
On their own at their homes.
Right.
And meet together.
Okay. And we are going to lose sales tax, definitely.
Yes. Now, one of the articles that I did read again on the website today from the state, they are seeing it's a small bump in the sales tax revenues, and that was kind of an anomaly they didn't expect for the month of February going into March and then into April. What they're suspecting did that was anticipation. People were afraid. They knew that something was coming. So they went out and they did a lot of bulk purchases.
All that toilet paper.
That's what I'm thinking. Toilet paper, paper towels, tissues, hand sanitizers, things like that. All of that has generated some bump in revenue. Whether we'll see that in April with the money that we get, I don't know. They're not hopeful that it will carry forward with April's because of lack of travel, lack of going out and purchasing, the stores closing down, things of that nature. So again, I'm monitoring the website to see what is, continuing to update and read the feedback as much as I can to, see what the potential is out there. We just don't know. I did a short analysis on the electricity for Florida Power and Light, and they do break it out nicely for us for residential and commercial. And when you look at the commercial side of things, it potentially could be $20,000 in lost revenue a month if there were no commercial revenues coming back to us. But when you stop and think, when businesses shut down, I don't think they turn off all of their electricity, and I'm guessing, but there is some type of electricity going through these buildings. So there should be some type of revenue. I just can't gauge how much. And then if you also look at it from the offset of residential, children are home, there's more cooking and things being done at home, so maybe there will be a spike in the residential side as well. So again, those are just things that we're going to have to wait and see how it plays out in June when we start receiving our revenue checks in.
Commissioners on the phone, any questions for our financial director?
This is Commissioner George. Did Ms. Burns leave that magical wand behind when she left us? We're just keep our fingers crossed and keep doing all the great work you're doing, Patty. Maybe we'll find a magic wand and get some extra revenue. That's all we can hope for. Thank you for the update.
Commissioner Rumwell?
Patty, thank you for the update. And this may be a time for us as a commission and as with city manager to really sit down and there's going to be some revenue coming in federally. And this is the time to have those conversations with the federal side of things. The state may even have some money for small municipalities like ourselves, because like Patty, like you said, this is, we got hit hard because of the restaurants being closed and other things that are done. We may get some from the uptick of, people hoarding toilet paper and paper towels and other things. But I think this is a time to strike as a commission and as a city and really try to find out what the state and or what the federal government may do to help municipalities like ourselves out. And I think if we become proactive with that now, we may see a light at the end of the tunnel for us. And because once they announce it, we're already 5 steps behind. So if there's anything I can do, I know that Chief, you have a great relationship with Congressman Rutherford and Congressman Waltz. And there may be some dialogue that we can all start having with them if that is going to happen. And again, I think the sooner the later, just because once it becomes announced, then every municipality is going to go after something. So I suggest highly that we all as a group figure out what we can do to get on the radar and start looking for some of that revenue stream that will come out. I'm fairly confident something is going to happen, and I'd like to be at the top of the list and not the bottom. Thank you.
So Commissioner Rumwell, you're suggesting we keep our eyes and ears open and write letters, right?
I think even more so than that. I think it's having the hard conversation with Congressman Waltz, Congressman Rutherford, and really, and I can try on my end as well with some people I have, and just see what really is happening. I think letters are great, Mayor, but as you know, it's kind of, they kind of get them and they kind of just toss them to the side. So I really think that we need to take even a stronger proactive approach and really trying to do that. And we can do it together with the city of St. Augustine. I'm sure they're going to have their own issues. I'm sure the county's going to have their own issues. So collectively as a group, again, I think that there's a real opportunity for all of us to come together, which is what the saying is now. We're all in this together. Well, let's all in this together and figure out a way of raising revenue for our municipalities.
Okay, Commissioner Samora, questions and comments?
Yeah, first, I think that's a great idea, and hopefully Max, Patty, you're watching for I think there will be some federal assistance, so let's stay on top of that and support it any way we can individually and through the Florida League of Cities, through those joint letters, things like that. I do have a question about the numbers. I know you said everything is reported, I guess, 2 months in arrears. Do they give you any forecast? Do they give you any kind of projection at all, 6, 12 months forward at all?
They don't. And that's where, we focus on that website, and initially large red letters last couple of weeks saying we have no estimates. We're not even sure what we're going to be able to do for FY21. So the estimates for your budgets may be delayed even further than what they typically are. There has been some discussion again with the finance group, and there's been some statements thrown out that, well, it was budgeted and it was appropriated, so therefore we should receive it. But much like we do budget adjustments, as needed. And I find it very difficult to believe that the state isn't also going to do a budget adjustment somewhere. And unfortunately, it's going to trickle down to us. As I said, the latest that I read was just a slight upturn in the numbers that they saw, but they're not audited, they're not finalized. For end of February, beginning of March in the sales, and but there's no definites out there, and that certainly doesn't trickle down to by county, by city.
But we know there's no definites, and I think you've done a great job of identifying the sources of revenue that are in jeopardy as far as the different half-cent sales tax and state revenue sharing, those things. So I see the budget in the prior year to date. Where's your best guess? Have you done a best guess as what this looks like as far as revenue loss?
I have not. Again, not knowing, as I said, with the Florida or, FP&L, it's, if I take a guess at, reducing the full amount, it's a $20,000 loss for commercial for, X number of months, or at least the month of April. But then I think there's some offsets, probably not to the extent of, a 100-room hotel running at full capacity versus people with children at home and cooking and, doing their homework and such. It's not going to be a full offset. I would say that we're probably going to see a loss in revenue, particularly when it comes to fuel taxes. Especially since there's less people on the road. I think that's just a given. And I'm guessing maybe $4,000 or $5,000 a month. Fuel prices are down, travel is down. That's about a 20% reduction. But again, it's very hard for me to gauge when we're so far behind in receiving that revenue.
I know, no one's got a crystal ball. I'd love to see you at least take a stab at best case, worst case, what you think it is. I know VCB, they did it back in March, at the March board meeting, and they had a best case, worst case, and we got together as a board, and I want to say they projected 60% revenue decline for April. And after talking with the board, we adjusted the worst case down to 90%, and I think that probably proved out to be the most likely case with all the hotels shut down. So I think having those scenarios, at least take a stab at it. For example, fuel, we know that use is down, but we also know that the cost of it's down. So it looks like we've got $20,000 a month in road and bridge fuel tax revenue. That may be down 80%. So it'd be nice to see it all rolled up into one kind of worst case, what you believe number, and so we can.
I can take a stab at it, just don't hold me to it, because
there's no way we can hold you to it.
At this point, as I said, so many professionals out there in my seat in other cities and counties who are in the same boat. They just don't know where the target is going. It seems to be moving. The good thing is if, the economy opens back up, people get back to work, businesses start opening, maybe it's short-lived, but I still think that, being a city that is based on tourism, it really could impact us. How quickly are people going to come back here? That I think remains to be seen, at least through the month of May, to see how well it goes through the different phases of the openings. But I will take a stab at it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all you've done so far.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Patty, for all of the work that you have done, and I have been back and forth with you as well on some questions that I had and digging into the numbers a little bit. I'm really disappointed that you're standing up there alone, though, and that our city manager is not standing there with you, because it's his responsibility. The financial well-being of our city falls directly under his job description, and yet you're there. So Be that as it may, perhaps you're the one with all the answers. So when I asked you about the biggest difference, notably right away, that we had a discrepancy in the prior year-to-date and our year-to-date revenues was in our investment funds. And so I don't know if any other commissioners were able to delve into this a little bit, but Patty shared with me that, because I was like, wow, somebody's doing a really bad job at managing our investments, maybe we should find somebody new. But that's not it at all. And what happens throughout the year is that sometimes, for a good 6 months out of the year, is that correct? We need to borrow funds from our investment accounts in order to maintain paying our bills. And then as our tax revenues come in, our property tax revenues come in, then those funds are put back into the checking account. So it's moving money from one checking account to another, and my question was, well, why didn't we ever see this money transaction in any of our updates at our meetings? Well, it's because the investment fund and the general checking fund are both considered general fund. So that makes sense. I did notice, though, on your update that you sent today, because I did ask for a list of the withdrawals and deposits to those funds, that to date, and we made a deposit today, yay. So our investment fund is back up to plus 150,000, whereas last year we had a deficit of 125,000. So that's another good thing to note. I want to be cautious about the fear factor. Fear meaning false evidence appearing real. And I too am very concerned about the future of the finances of our city because there's so much that's at risk due to a situation that's beyond our control. And so I can't imagine being in your position trying to forecast out the finances for an entire city. I've just spent a couple of weeks trying to do that for my little itty-bitty business, so bless your heart. But good news is hopefully we have our investments in the right place, because April was, as far as the market goes, April was the third best month in the stock market since World War II. Third best month. So hopefully we'll see a little bit of improvement in our investments. So a couple of things, food for thought. Just so that you know, as far as I am aware, the COVID recovery money is going from the federal level to the state level. And it's at the state level that it will be decided where within the state that those funds will go to cities and counties. So I would venture to say it would be more worth our while to get in touch with our representative, Cindy Stevenson, and others to put a voice in for our city. Because what Commissioner Samora said is absolutely true about the tourism numbers. Rough guesstimates, it's looking like approximately 50% of Americans have already canceled their summer vacation plans. Being a city that's heavily reliant on tourism, this could be a very potentially dangerous thing for us. But I also admire your knowledge on the whole perspective of the electricity. Now, I know that there's a big factor involved for hotels, because when a hotel shuts down a bunch of rooms, they turn the air conditioning off and there's very little electricity going on. However, in businesses, like even myself, when I'm closed for a good month or more during the year, there is certain things that you have to maintain and have to have on. Yes, you turn off most of it, but you have to have on quite a bit. So my electric bill maybe goes down by a third, but not even a half, unfortunately, for me. I think that you're correct. There may be somewhat of a balance, but if we put the hotel factor in, that's going to weigh the scales a little bit differently. I would also like to echo Commissioner Samora's request and see if we could do like, okay, what does a 50% decline look like? What does a 60% decline look like? And let's go a little bit positive, maybe a 30% decline. And just see what numbers that we're looking at so that we can figure it out for the rest of the year. I commend all of your steps that you've taken. I mean, if you watch the pennies, the dollars will grow, right? So hopefully that will happen. But I really admire and respect and thank you for taking those steps immediately and right away so that we can get this somewhat under control. We're not exactly here just due to COVID, and that's something to keep in mind. You know, just before this crisis hit, we were told by our auditor that we needed to have a healthier emergency fund, and this is one of the reasons why. So we need to keep that in mind as we move forward into the next budget cycle as well. And I think that's enough. I'm sure that everybody is wishing that I'd lost my voice by now, but yes, thank you so much for all your work on that, and I look forward to hearing more and seeing what we can do to make things
positive.
That's right.
Commissioners, any further questions of our financial director? All righty. Patty, thank you very much. Is there public comment?
I do.
All right.
Mr. Tom Reynolds.
Tom Reynolds, 50 Brigantine. I'm so glad that we have a giant reserve because it is going to get ugly. I've been following everything coming out of that State House. And I am just so glad that we have over millions in there. Oh, wait a minute. That's right. I'm sorry. We substitute the waste disposal. We don't have a large reserve. I want you to remember what John Rutherford said. John Rutherford called in here and he said that we don't want to bail out the cities that are fiscally irresponsible. That's us. That's this city, fiscally irresponsible. See, I wrote John Rutherford a letter the next day, and I wanted to know, did he mean just cities in other states, or did he mean fiscally irresponsible cities here in Florida? And I explained to him how we're the only city that subsidizes waste disposal. And I explained to him in that email, I didn't get an answer back, how fiscally irresponsible that is, and there's only one city in the state of Florida that does that, St. Augustine Beach. So, commissioners, it ain't going to look good. We're going to have a lot of problems here financially. Probably going to have to lay off some people. Probably going to have to cut back. The city might not even survive. Might go into insolvency because of the fiscal irresponsible commission that we've had for years here. When you go back and look at how much that subsidy cost, right now we don't have $10 million in that bank book because of the fiscal irresponsibility of the St. Augustine Beach commissioners. I especially blame the mayor, and I do blame Undine. They've been here for years. They've been failing this city fiscally for years. Allowing that to happen, I just hope they don't punish the city, because it is you who's created it.
Any further comment?
No further comment.
All right. Thank you. We shall move on to the proposed fee schedule changes for the building department, building and zoning. Mr. Law.
All right, so the proposed fee schedule has shown the changes in red. I would draw a note that on page 1 under residential hotels and assisted care facilities, that didn't show up red in the photocopy. And I want to start there. The International Code Council is the basis for most building codes, and it proposes a fee schedule. Given the complexity of building hotels and assisted care facilities with the types of construction, it makes more sense to let the national average dictate. So I do recommend using that. On the next page, the clearance sheet fee. As you see, that's a name change from land clearing fee to clearance sheet. I have shifted the department to a one-form application for submittals. It's just administrative. Then we see where I struck out bank and put and landscape fund. That coincides with our city's tree and landscape fund right out of the land development code. Also, the next one, $400, is a little steep for a screen enclosure for a site review. So I do propose lowering that down to $100 for that and commercial renovations. Now, when I say commercial renovations, I mean changing the use of a commercial building. Is it compatible with our allowed uses? Is it something of that nature, not constructing a new structure? Some of the commissioners are aware we have rolled out a large format printer and copier. To charge for that, I need to charge at least $5 a sheet. Average from all the Staples and Office Max are around $375 or $380 black and white. I do not want to become Kinko's print shop, but we do reserve that as a right, and we are using it to help with work at home for the engineers right now. Chapter 1 of the building code authorizes the building official to create a refund policy. I've taken the standardized policy from most jurisdictions. If we do a prior to first inspection refund, if the permit's canceled, I'll give you half of your permit fee back, but I will not provide any refunds for the state surcharges or the plan review fees as those were done. After the first inspection, 0 refunds because the job is broke ground. Mechanical, the change out's just administrative per system. So if we have 3 units in a big house, it's $50 per system. On page 3, electrical, I changed the title of your main service to amps per main service, panel or upgrade. But what I did is I brought in another tier. So in big buildings, take for example Corral Dental, that's an 800 amp service with 3 individual subpanels. So previously the building department wasn't being compensated for that. That is not the way we do commercial buildings. So this is directly in line with the county. And perfect example is we may not build out the 2 phases of Corral Dental. That has 2 suites to the side, so as they do an interior build out, they'll pay for whatever amp service they actually install. Additions and repairs, same thing per dwelling or unit. Generator, even though we've been charging the same $40, this is just another tier that lets me filter information better. Solar permit fees, we didn't have anything to address it, so it's the same permit issuance fee and then based on the valuation table off the building code. Plumbing, once again, repipe per dwelling or unit, no big change. Advertising signs, we are not covering the cost of the sign in the stand anymore, so $10 from our supplier will cover it. Mixed-use development review, it looks like a couple changes, but it's really not. It's just cleaning it up, and the appeal was in direct contradiction to the appeal of the building official or planning and zoning board, so that's been eliminated. Overlay districts, that was left out of the city's fee schedule, but it was previously $200 off the application. $200 doesn't adequately cover staff time to present the case, do the minutes, and legally advertise the case. We're familiar with tree removals, 30 inches or greater, requiring planning and zoning board approval. Even though it's not legally advertised, it does take staff time. So I do recommend the minimum fee of $50. And then flexible setbacks that the commission instituted 2 years ago, with the exception of Anastasia Dunes and the Ridge, those flexible setbacks require planning and zoning board approval. So once again, minutes. Review of preliminary plat, I do recommend a $400 minimum because if somebody comes in with 4 lots, then we're going through the whole motion for $158. It's not going to cover the legal advertising. Transient lodging, initial inspections, once again per dwelling or unit, but an increase to $125. Your code enforcement officer is paid by the building department out of building department revenue. Essentially, if you add in all the fees that go with the pay, the benefits, it's about $50,000. Building department is funding most of that. This goes a long way to helping pay for the code enforcement officer so we can keep the code enforcement's pay out of general funds. Annual reinspection, it tracks initial inspection. And I guess that's it. I would note on the resolution, this was actually proposed, but we've been thinning out the agenda and there was no rush on this, that the date would have to be updated on the bottom of the resolution.
Seems like a long time ago.
I believe I started in March, but then, city got busy.
All right, I'll start with the commissioners on the phone if you have any questions of Mr. Law. Commissioner George?
No questions, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Law. This is a good update. It's time we get those fees in, unfortunately, given everything we heard at the last presentation.
Yes, ma'am, you're welcome.
Commissioner Rumwell.
No, I just want to say thank you to Mr. Law for taking the time. I know this has been a little bit of a long rodeo for you, but I appreciate your hard work, and thank you again.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Samora.
When would these be effective?
Effective immediately.
Okay, I definitely think this is the right direction to go, and I applaud your efforts in getting this stuff done and continuing to make progress on this. I'm a little bit reluctant to do anything that's going to increase fees at this point in time for anybody. I'd be more comfortable with like a 90-day or something that would allow some folks some time. And I realize not all of these are increases, but some of them certainly are.
Right, your increases would be to your commercial electrical, and if you've looked, I'm sure you've looked through, but you see my little line graphs. Well, you don't have the April one. We are definitely in a steep decline as expected, and we will continue a decline most likely as we track the national economy by a couple months. The transient rentals shouldn't be an issue. When do we, Ms. B, my nose, when do we send out renewals for business tax receipts?
In in July.
So we have a month or so, but it's up to you, whatever you think is best.
And actually, one of the that's one that kind of hits me is you're raising fees on transient rentals. They haven't been able to rent for a month, and I believe they're still not supposed to be taking reservations.
As of now, they're not, but keep in mind, this was presented, it was going to be presented in March, but we just got so busy, so I pulled it. And like I said, the code enforcement officers paid out of building department revenue. This was what funds, even if you assume 200, which you don't have, that would only cover half of the code enforcement officer's salary. So this is trying to keep the code enforcement officer from ever having to go to general funds.
Commissioner, Vice Mayor?
Could we put a deferment on the transient rentals until, say, like August 1st or September 1st? And
We can do whatever you want.
maybe with that, what do you think about that?
I don't have a magic date in mind. I just know that I'm seeing articles from around the state where municipalities are doing just the opposite. They're suspending fees and things like that to try to help get things going again and recognize that a lot of places just haven't had the business. So,
I mean, if we want to postpone this 3 months, then we just put an effective date like we did with some setback changes a couple years ago. We just did a 90-day, so what month are we, May? We can make effective August 4th. That would be 3 months. I mean,
I would definitely want it to be prior to the beginning of the next fiscal year, but anytime between now and then.
Okay, whatever you think is best.
I'm open to suggestions. I just wanted to throw the concern out there.
Are you thinking like maybe August 1 or something like that? Just a reasonable delay?
A reasonable delay for folks that are,
So we can communicate the new fees out?
communicate it.
Yeah.
and
Okay, August 1st.
I'd be fine.
And like I said, we've done this before with other stuff.
All right, I think for this resolution, we will need a motion. I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 20-09 with an effective date, it'll have to be rewritten, effective date August 1, 2020.
I'll second that.
We need a roll call vote.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor England?
Yes?
Vice Mayor Cosca?
Yes.
Commissioner George?
Yes.
Commissioner Rumwell?
Yes.
And Commissioner Samora?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you all. We are down to item number 7 under new business. Did we have public comment on the fee schedule?
There is no public comment on fee schedule.
Sorry, I missed that. Item number 7, St. Johns County Local Mitigation Strategy Plan. Mr.
All right.
Law.
This is done every 5 years. We have a tri-jurisdictional area with us, the county and the city. The county's EOC Center does perform this. The beach is represented as a voting member, and that is myself, at quarterly meetings. So what is this? this allows us to apply for the hazard mitigation grant, which is 100% funded the year. Without this, we don't get to apply for anything. This takes into account natural hazards, not airborne viruses. This takes into account that we can predict floods, earthquakes, stuff that we see repetitively. So that's what this is. It's good reading. And of course, the whole back end of it's just minutes, so it's kind of boring. But this is a requirement, and then you probably did receive an email from me through the city manager maybe like a month ago or a couple weeks ago. That's part of your annual recertification for the 510 activity of the CRS program. We have to do this. Other than that, it's a good book to read.
I'll have to be honest with you. I was reading this just before I fell asleep last night and fell asleep as I was reading it.
You can buy your nightstand. It'll get you to sleep anytime you want.
But I see clearly the importance of having a document like this and the need for it in order to apply for grants and preserve what we have.
And so this mitigation strategy needs to be approved by the county and both cities, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Part of the process is it goes to the State Department of Emergency Management. They review it. They say it complies with the federal standards and the Code of Federal Regulations 44. Then as such, we get a response back, and then it's up to the jurisdictions to approve it. Then at that point, once they get the resolutions approving it, they'll send it up to FEMA.
So since I was the one that asked about why it doesn't address local, state, or, and, you know, it's a emergency. We have emergency meetings every week on this. And I'm not saying it has to be in here, because I realize that the update on this plan started maybe a year ago.
5 years ago.
Right. And so I wouldn't expect it to be in here. But is there been any talk with the task force or the committee on updating this for that reason for health concerns?
Well, we meet quarterly, and we haven't met
Okay.
before this happened.
Okay.
But I'm sure when we have our couple-hour meeting, we'll talk about it in great detail.
Because, quite frankly, you know, we rely on the county's loss mitigation strategy for everything. The city does, you know, and so we follow what is in this document, right? And what's in the emergency management meetings and what comes out of there.
Yes, ma'am. The Code of Federal Regulations 44 is your emergency management guidelines, and that's what drives what we have to have in the plan. But like I said, I mean, definitely this is going to come up at our next meeting, whenever we have it. And Kelly Wilson and Linda over there are just fantastic, and I stay in communication with them. One of them texted me on Sunday, asking me about the beach. So they actually have my direct line, which is pretty hard to get.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. Other commissioners, Commissioner George.
Thank you, Mayor. No questions at this time.
Commissioner Rumwell.
Thank you, Mayor. No questions.
Commissioner Samora.
Nope, you've covered it.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
So you'll find out if they will be covering in the future a situation like we're in now with the COVID-19. I guess it would, what would they deem that?
Or what, Kelly Wilson is the one who handles this. But like I said, we'll have our meetings, it'll come up. We have people from all different agencies. The hospital shows up, the county sheriff, I'm there, Bill Tredick's usually there. The Flagler Hospital's there, the school boards. I mean, this is everybody.
Right. And what about environmental hazards? Like, for instance, if we had a horrible chemical spill or something bizarre that, like...
Keep in mind, this is natural hazards. This is what this document...
Natural.
Yes, ma'am. So it's basically your weatherborne, fire, you know, anything like that. Fire, hurricanes, flooding, storm surges. Yes, ma'am.
And I think that was actually covered, hazardous waste or something. There was something in here.
Yes, ma'am. They have some certain things in there. But for the most part, the whole thing is derived from the natural disasters.
Right, human-caused hazards. It's under there. So, might be in there. And I didn't read every word of this, but I did look at the index.
Just keep it by the nightstand. Guaranteed to fall asleep.
One of the maps. Like,
All right. Chief, you have any comments on this?
No, ma'am, again, that's one of those books I have not read. On Mr. Law. Unless Lee in his spare time has, and I'm gonna say he has not, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Okay, all right, okay. Thank you, Mr. Law. Now, we need to, by resolution, adopt this plan, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion from a commissioner to approve resolution number 20-10.
So moved.
I'll second.
I'll second.
Commissioner George will second. Roll call vote, please.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor England?
Yes?
Vice Mayor Cosca?
Yes.
Commissioner George?
Yes.
Commissioner Rumwell?
Yes.
And Commissioner Samora?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you all. We are now down to staff comments.
Madam Mayor,
No,
we have
new
the
business
addition.
number 8, the special resolution that was
Oh,
given to
yes,
us
yes,
earlier.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Mr. Law. Okay,
Hang out up here for a while.
all right. So if you'll tee this one up for us.
All right, obviously, we didn't have a lot of prep time on this because we didn't know the governor's order until end of last week. So I reached out to the fire department, I've reached out to Chief Hardwick, and I reached out to the city attorneys to allow temporary outdoor seating where none was allowed through conditional use. Keep in mind, the conditional uses take about 2 months from its inception to its finalization here at the commission. The attorney drafted a very good resolution, in my opinion, and I have included with you an application for temporary outdoor seating, where I basically mirror what he has, and then I put certain conditions of the permit. Some of those were generated with me in the phone conversations with the fire department at the county. So our recommendation is for me to have the authority to approve outdoor seating, maintain the parking, I can handle that, maintain handicap parking, bathrooms, portable fire extinguishers, tent permits at 900 square feet. That is a rule from the county fire department, and most likely is based in the fire code. Keep in mind, that's a big tent. If anybody's seen the tents at Oasis for their Christmas in July, that's an 800 square foot tent. So we don't have a lot of places to put 900 square feet of. 25% just doesn't cut it for the restaurants. So open, staff everything. So this would give them a little bit, but it would sunset if the governor does see fit to issue 50% indoor seating. That should level the playing field for their costs. And the attorneys have put expiration at the end of the year in case something happens. We just don't know what the governor's going to do.
I want to thank you for putting this together. I know that the restaurants in our city, as well as across the nation, have been suffering. And it is enormously difficult with 25% of your seating.
You can't make your money.
No, you can't afford to pay your employees that you need to have on staff in order to serve the people, and it's, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you so much for having the insight and foresight to be able to do this.
And so anyone who applies for this, we would, within your authority to grant that permit for 30 days only?
We can do whatever you feel comfortable with. Keep in mind, we have another program very similar to this. It's a special use permit. But that is limited to 5 times a year and then up to 3 days. It would, and they have to pay $50 a piece. So this seems to take this into account, and let's let the governor help steer us where we go, and let the city staff who specializes in this run the restaurants, at least the safety and the parking established.
Yeah, I really like that idea that you put in here, that it sunsets with the governor's order, so whenever he decides and the restaurants can go back to a minimum of 50%, then,
City attorneys did a great job on this.
yeah, thank you.
Is there anything in here that would limit the outdoor seating, so just to make sure it doesn't exceed, I guess, the maximum seating already in place for the building?
Well, that wouldn't necessarily, I mean, it's kind of apples and oranges there a little bit, because inside the building is regulated.
I'm looking
But
at
we
it
could,
The sewer and that, the capacity, I know they look at that stuff when they look at capacity of the restaurant, they look at.
Yep, utility department would look at that in the event of addition. We could put I could put conditions of the permit. I would just move the city or county reserves a right and do number 7. Max occupancy, including outdoor seating, shall not exceed previously set forth occupancy.
Something like that, simple.
Yep, no problem.
It'd be a real challenge for anybody to be able to do that anyway, because where would they put the seating? If they don't already have it.
But this is good government. This is, let's find a solution to help the businesses out.
Step forward.
If you think about some of your businesses, they're set up. We have certain restaurants that have outdoor seating, so there may not be as subject, but look at Oasis, look at Mango's, and look at these places that just don't have them, and the process for conditional use just doesn't get you there. In 2 months, who knows where we're going to be? And they'd be $400 poorer.
Commissioners on the phone, any questions? Just go ahead and speak up.
Commissioner George, no questions, just again, echoing what's been said, I'm all in on this. This is very good government. I like that there are no fees. I like that it's expedited. Thank you for putting this together.
You're welcome.
I echo Mayor, Commissioner George. Thank you, Mr. Law, and thank you to our legal staff for putting this together. And I think the idea of letting it sunset along the governor's orders, I mean, I think that's the very best the government can do to not get in the way of businesses. So I applaud the city of St. Augustine Beach to do that. So thank you, Mr. Law.
You're welcome.
I also am loving this. This is great. All right, so we don't have a resolution number.
It would be 20-11.
I'll make a motion that we adopt City of St. Augustine Beach Resolution Number 20-11.
I'll second that.
Second, okay, roll call vote?
Yes, ma'am. Mayor England?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Pasca?
Yes.
Commissioner George?
Yes.
Commissioner Rumwell?
Yes.
And Commissioner Samora?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Mayor, can we just give direction? I'm sure it's already in the works, but just clear direction to get this really accessible, advertised to the businesses. Our communications department can really promote it every way possible would be great. Thank you.
I think that's a great idea, and we will be on it.
I've already spoken to several restaurant owners.
Okay.
I told them that this was coming up on the agenda tonight as a last-minute entry.
Okay.
They obviously supported it.
All right.
But I'll finish going face-to-face with the owners of the restaurants and dropping off the application and the resolution.
And get it to me, I'll get it to the FRLA.
Okay. We'll send you a digital copy. Thank you.
Okay, so we are winding up except for staff comments. I'll start with the police department. Chief?
Nothing, no ma'am.
Okay. Max?
At your meeting on April 29th, you decided that you would have a public hearing in June on the non-ad valorem assessment range. I need you to consider tonight a date in June for that, either a special meeting or perhaps having it, depending on advertising requirements, on June 1st, which is a Monday, which is your normal, regular day for your monthly meeting. I need the date so we can advertise the date. We have to send a notice to every property owner, single-family and duplex, et cetera, owner who would be subject to the non-ad valorem assessment in the city. We have in June 5 Mondays. And no holidays.
I anticipate lots of public comment.
Possibly. There wasn't a great deal when you had the last assessment, but that was 2011, 2010. So we have more population now. It's hard to say.
Quite a larger assessment.
Yeah. People may be more keyed up about it.
I'm concerned about capacity for the public to be here.
Yeah. Well, we could have luck and possibly not have these distancing requirements, but again, we don't know.
I'm thinking more in the middle of June, because there's maybe a likelihood that the social distancing might be, for St. Johns County, might be relieved a little bit, but I need input from the other commissioners. What y'all think?
I think it's prudent to allow more time than less. Just every week that we can push it out is one more week closer to loosening restrictions on social distancing. I think June 15th would be right in the middle. It's 2 weeks after our regular meeting.
Commissioner George or Commissioner Rumwell, thoughts?
Mayor, just again, safety is a priority. I think Commissioner Samora's suggestion is a good one.
Mayor, I feel the same way. I think the 15th at the earliest, and we can go from there if it looks like things aren't where we anticipate them being.
Okay. Max, I think you've received a somewhat consensus of June 15th. I'll go with that too.
Vice Mayor?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. June 15th, 6 p.m. Thank you. And that's all I have.
Okay. Mr. Law, anything more?
I have no more.
Finance Director.
No, ma'am.
City Clerk.
I just want to apologize for not being here on May 4th. I had emergency surgery, so I apologize for not being here, but I'm glad to be back. Thank you.
No apology needed.
Is he? Mr. Tredick, are you there?
I am.
All right. Oh, you've been so patient and quiet.
I don't have any significant changes from my report. With the beaches open all day now, we're back to maintaining the bathrooms on an all-day schedule. So we're trying to adjust our schedules to make sure we have sanitization on Saturdays and Sundays as much of the day as possible. The crosswalk flags are back out because of the anticipated pedestrians that are going to be out there, and traffic safety with people coming back is going to be as much or greater concern than the risk of transmitting the virus. So it's one of those situations where there's no perfect answer, but we don't want people getting hit. So we put the crosswalk flags back out, and that's all I have.
And you did hear the thank you for starting to perform some maintenance on our landscaping.
I did. Thank you.
Very good. Yeah, that's important. So thank you for doing that.
If I can add one thing, Mr. Trenick reminded me. There is discussion about beach driving resuming in the near future. We've asked to at least go through this Mother's Day weekend to see how we adjust. But based on my staff today, if you didn't see the pier parking lot, we're going to have to make some adjustments to get the relief off of our parking lots onto the beach driving. So there is a discussion going on. Of course, we're one small piece of the puzzle. Gowanna State Park did actually open today. It was not originally on the list. So Gowanna Central and Gowanna South opened, which gave a substantial amount of parking spaces in the north part of our county. However, Gowanna North is still closed. But Anastasia State Park remains closed. I'm not sure how much relief of our parking that does, but I know the beach driving does. However, we do have concerns about the soft sand conditions currently at A Street and Ocean Trace Road. So again, it's under discussion. It'll be discussed briefly tomorrow morning at 8:30 hours at the county commission meeting before their regular meeting starts at 9. Again, we were trying to get through the weekend for Mother's Day to see how busy we are. But again, I think it's the only way to relieve some of this parking will be to open the beach driving and parking across the entire county.
Are you receiving complaints from citizens about parking within the city streets?
We had a few parking issues over the weekend, but really the weekend was kind of quiet because we did kind of a implementing slow moving to this morning till today, which was the all day. So we didn't have any issues. I think people were a little confused that there were still some people allowed on the beach after noon. That was by design. We were trying to allow that without advertising it. So today wasn't kind of everybody jumped to, let's go to the beach after noon today. So the juvenile problem is continuing. It's going to be a problem here in our jurisdiction. I think it's going to become a norm because these young men and women have no place to go in St. Johns County besides our beaches, and the pier is the best place to go because they can do everything from eat, use bathrooms, and swim in the ocean. So again, we'll deal with those issues as they come along, but today was a problem from about 1 o'clock to about 4 o'clock.
Would it be your recommendation to leave the A Street ramp and, what was the other one that you said, Ocean Trace?
Road, yes, ma'am.
Closed and open the others?
So we have that option. I've done it in the past, as you know, based on beach driving conditions. Of course, working with beach services, St. Johns County Fire and Rescue, and the Sheriff's Office. The only concern is if I leave A Street and Ocean Trace Road, all it does is push, I say our problems, it pushes them down to Mary Street, Crescent Beach. So half dozen the other, we're going to be overloaded in our county on the south beaches. So we'll work with St. Johns County Fire and Rescue, myself and Commander Ashlock. We're usually out there anyways on the weekends. So we'll see how it goes this weekend if indeed we do have beach driving. But as of now, we're pushing to start beach driving next week sometime.
Chief, heading into the shutdown, I know we experienced issues with folks from surrounding counties, and I think we solicited some assistance from Putnam County Sheriffs. Make that part of your discussion. I think we're going to need some help with that.
Sure, that's as you know, we have a great relationship with St. Johns County Sheriff's Office for mutual aid, and their YRD deputies, or youth resource deputies, are out of school, as we know. So they've been a lot of assistance to us. So we are going to request probably one of our local high school YRDs to come and assist us at the pier and identify some of these individuals. I can identify most of the ones I coach, but those kids I don't think are going to be right in my jurisdiction. They're going to be a little bit further south.
Chief, and I have a question for you too. Have you all talked to anybody in Jacksonville about when are they going to loosen their restrictions? I know they went to all day today, but still no sitting, it's all movement. Have you had discussions with the city of Jacksonville or people in Jacks Beach when they may lift their restrictions? Because I'm afraid that this weekend may get pretty nasty again in the north because they're limiting what you can do on the beach.
Yes, sir, Commissioner. Mr. Conrad is in constant contact with Mayor Curry and Mayor Latham, and I'm in contact with the police chiefs up there, particularly Gene Paul Smith from Jacksonville Beach, and the Sheriff Williams. So between all of us, we're communicating. They're asking today about our restrictions, and again, there's talk up there to actually lift their restrictions since Nassau County is the same as ours. Pretty much, they're the only jurisdiction left with the back to normal operation since they have no beach driving out of their 14 miles. So I think you'll see that change soon, Commissioner.
All right, thank you, Chief. I was just thinking that may help us too with limiting the driving on the beach. If they open up, then I think we may get less people coming down to St. John's wanting to drive on the beach and stuff like that too.
Yes, sir. I think we're going to see a new, different landscape of visitors from our western counties. Again, we have everybody's out of school, college kids and our young adults from high school and below. And I think we're going to see a new dynamics here in St. Augustine Beach of youth, a lot of youth coming here. And again, we're as long as we can control it, we don't want to discourage it, but also too we want to educate them. I just got a text from our officers on night shift, and there's the beach parking lot is pier parking lot is full of trash, especially by the splash park area where all the juveniles were hanging out. So there's certain things we just can't tolerate. So we're going to have to think of some innovative ways to do this without these kids getting a criminal record. We're not for that.
No, I appreciate you. You always do a good job, Chief, of explaining things and not just going for the gauntlet. So I appreciate your way of handling things. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And Commissioners, too, I think now with our two full-time beach officers, they know a lot of these young men and women out there. So I think it's a better working relationship. It just so happens our new beach officer is from Putnam County. So that kind of helps out with it too as well. But if you didn't go through the beach parking lot or the pier parking lot this afternoon around 4 o'clock, majority of those vehicles were from Putnam County.
I did notice that, Chief. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Chief.
Mayor, I forgot one thing. We are supposed to go out to bid for an RFP for the medical insurance, and I'm not sure, I want your opinions, I'm not sure if that would be a good idea right now. Being with the COVID, I did check with several agencies, and they said they don't know what the future will hold. They don't see anything yet to know, but I'm worried about whether we should do that in the middle of this and change places, because they might say, well, yeah, we'll give them a deal now, but then next year it'll be 25% more, or whatever it is. So I kind of wanted your opinion on whether or not to go out for it's ready. I'm ready to go, but I know budget is coming up in July, the end of July usually, and I want to make sure, I have to send that out in June, and you won't have your meeting until, so.
I think we should move forward with it. And we're seeing an increase in our plan that we have had for a number of years anyway. So, I mean, it does seem to happen whenever you sign up. And maybe one of the factors that we can use in negotiation is locking in a rate for like consecutive years so that we know what it's going to be for at least 2 years. They're so mean.
They will not do that, because that's why they do it yearly, because they will not, it goes by certain dynamics, and they will not lock themselves into that, but once a year.
Well, I think we need to move forward with it, at least get the RFP out.
I just wanted your opinions, because I'll put it through in June, but if you know, depending on what you all feel, it's up to you to what I should do. So.
Commissioner Samar?
I think we move forward.
Commissioners on the phone, any comment?
Mayor, I think, it's kind of a catch-22. I think we should, always look at bidding stuff out because you never know what you could get. But at the same time, I think for our employees' sake, that if there's no change or potential change in their coverage, there's some stability right now where there is a time where we don't have stability. And so I don't want to send a mixed message to our workers that we're trying to find a better solution for insurance when we're in this COVID-19. So, but on the flip side, to contradict what I just said, I also believe that, I think there may be an opportunity to have a conversation. I believe we do it through the Bailey Group, is maybe to sit down and talk to Mr. Bailey and say, hey, look, are the rates going to go really up? Are they really going to stay flat? And then we can make that decision. But I just, insurance is a big thing for me and employees, and I hate to kind of put it out there if we don't have to.
I did talk to Marcia Dixon of the Bailey Group, and she did advise me that they have they don't know what's going to happen in the future, but they did not see any, increase because of this. So I that's kind of, well, maybe, but no, so. And I did talk to a couple of the other agencies that I know are interested in bidding for our health insurance, and they said the same thing.
I'm trying to think of a really compelling reason to do something different than our normal procedure, and I'm not coming up with one, so I'm thinking just follow.
I thought part of the reason for going out was because we hadn't gone out to bid for a while, so we may end up right where we are today, just like we did with the other insurance, but I think as procedurally, we had good reason to do so. So I wouldn't change that.
Okay. All right. Any other further comments, business, anything else for tonight? then I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.
I'll second.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.